The arrogant message from the Eliani fleet crackles through Earth's communication systems, mocking humanity's primitive technology and declaring imminent conquest. Scott Holmes, a NASA engineer, jolts awake to the urgent buzz of his secure phone. His heart races as he reads the cryptic summons to a classified facility beneath Cape Canaveral. Hours later, Scott stands before Admiral Chen in a dimly lit chamber, surrounded by banks of humming computers and flickering holographic displays. The Admiral's face is grim as he reveals a secret that shatters Scott's understanding of human history. An ancient fleet of advanced spacecraft hidden on the far side of the moon for millennia. These ships, Admiral Chen explains, gesturing to the schematics floating before them, are far beyond our current capabilities. We believe they're remnants of a forgotten human civilization that once explored the stars. As they speak, alarms blare. The main screen shows the Eliani fleet, led by the ruthless Commander Yuna, systematically destroying Earth's orbital defenses. Satellites explode in silent bursts of light and debris, leaving the planet vulnerable. Your mission, Mr. Holmes, is to reverse engineer this technology and activate the dormant ships, the Admiral states, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding above. You're our best hope. Scott nods, determination etched on his face. He's ushered to a lab where a team of scientists work feverishly on alien-looking components. As Scott immerses himself in the ancient technology, he makes a startling discovery. The ship's control systems respond to his touch in ways they don't for others. A DNA scan confirms his suspicion. There's a genetic link between him and the forgotten civilization. The first ancient ship hums to life under Scott's hands, its activation triggering a beacon that echoes across the solar system. Hidden fleets, dormant for eons, begin to stir. The Eliani detect the energy surge. Commander Yuna's eyes narrow as she redirects her forces toward the moon base. Find the source of that power signature, she orders, her voice cold with anticipation. On Earth, Admiral Chen initiates emergency protocols. World leaders and top scientists are evacuated to the moon base as Scott's team races to activate more ships. The weight of humanity's survival presses down on them with each passing moment. Just as Scott powers up the third ancient vessel, the first Eliani assault rocks the lunar surface. Alarms blare, and dust rains from the ceiling of the underground base. "We're out of time," Admiral Chen shouts over the commotion. "Holmes, can you pilot one of these things?" Scott hesitates for a split second before nodding. He sprints to the nearest activated ship, feeling an inexplicable connection as he enters the cockpit. The ship responds to his thoughts, systems coming online with a mere touch. As Scott guides the ancient vessel out of its lunar hangar, he faces the vastness of space and the looming Eliani fleet. His hands steady on the controls, he discovers an innate ability to manipulate the ship's advanced weapon systems. The battle for Earth's survival begins. Humanity's forgotten legacy, piloted by a man who carries its genetic memory, faces off against the technologically superior Eliani invaders. The fate of the planet hangs in the balance as Scott accelerates towards the enemy, ready to prove that humanity's potential is far greater than the Eliani could have ever imagined. Scott's ancient vessel streaked through space, its sleek form gliding effortlessly between streams of Eliani fire. The ship's controls responded to his thoughts with uncanny precision, as if it were an extension of his own body. He barrel-rolled to avoid a barrage of plasma bolts, retaliating with a burst from the ship's energy weapons that shredded an enemy cruiser. "Holmes, status report." Admiral Chen's voice crackled through the comm system. "Holding my own, sir," Scott replied, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. "But there are too many of them. We need—" His words were cut short as a massive energy surge rocked his ship. Alarms blared as systems flickered, and Scott fought to regain control. Through the viewport, he saw the source of the attack. Commander Yuna's flagship, a behemoth of alien technology that dwarfed the surrounding vessels. "All units, concentrate fire on that ship." Yuna's cold voice echoed across the Eliani communication channels, which Scott's vessel had tapped into. "Destroy it at all costs." The space around Scott's ship erupted in a firestorm of energy beams and missiles. He weaved through the onslaught, but each evasive maneuver brought him dangerously close to being overwhelmed. Meanwhile, in the lunar base, Admiral Chen watched the battle unfold with growing concern. Holographic displays showed Scott's ship darting between enemy vessels, leaving destruction in its wake. But the sheer number of Eliani ships was staggering. "We need more pilots," Chen muttered, turning to the scientists huddled around a nearby console. "What's our progress on activating the other ships?" Dr. Emma Martinez, her dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, looked up from her work. "Admiral, I've made a breakthrough," she said, her eyes bright with excitement despite the dire situation. "These ships, they're not just responding to any human DNA, they're keyed to specific genetic markers." Chen's eyebrows shot up. "Explain." "It's like a biological lock and key," Martinez continued, pulling up a holographic model of a DNA strand. "Scott's genetic makeup contains sequences that match the ship's control systems. That's why he can pilot them so effortlessly." "Can we use this information to find other compatible pilots?" Chen asked. Martinez nodded. "We're already scanning personnel records. We've identified 2 potential candidates among the astronauts here on the base." "Get them prepped and into those ships immediately," Chen ordered. As the lunar base scrambled to launch reinforcements, the situation on Earth grew increasingly chaotic. News of the alien invasion spread like wildfire, triggering widespread panic. In New York, Tokyo, and London, streets clogged with fleeing civilians as air raid sirens wailed. Military forces worldwide mobilized, fighter jets screaming into the sky in a desperate attempt to bolster Earth's defenses. Back in space, Scott's ship shuddered under another barrage of enemy fire. Warning lights flashed across his control panel as systems began to fail. "Come on, hold together," Scott muttered, his hands flying over the controls. He managed to take out 2 more Eliani fighters, but for every ship he destroyed, 3 more seemed to take its place. Just as Scott's shields were about to give out, 2 energy beams lanced past his ship, striking an approaching Eliani cruiser. The enemy vessel exploded in a brilliant flash of light. "Looks like you could use a hand," a voice crackled over the comm. 2 more ancient ships, identical to Scott's, swooped into view. "Better late than never," Scott replied, relief evident in his voice. "Let's show these aliens what we're made of." The 3 human vessels moved in perfect synchronization, their advanced technology allowing them to cut through the Eliani forces with unprecedented efficiency. For a moment, it seemed as if the tide of battle might be turning. But aboard her flagship, Commander Yuna was far from defeated. Her eyes narrowed as she observed the unexpected resistance. "Enough of this," she snarled. "Prepare the Sunbreaker. Target their planet's major population centers." At her command, panels on the flagship's hull began to slide open, revealing a massive energy weapon that pulsed with an ominous light. The space around the weapon began to distort, creating a visible ripple effect that spread outward. On the lunar base, alarms blared as sensors detected the energy buildup. "Admiral," Dr. Martinez called out, her face pale. "I've found something in the ship's database. There's a planetary defense system hidden on Earth, but it's been dormant for thousands of years." Chen's mind raced. "Can we activate it?" "Possibly, but we'd need a team on the ground to access the control center," Martinez replied. Without hesitation, Chen turned to a nearby officer. "Get me Captain Jack Reeves. We need his team on Earth, now!" As Chen coordinated the desperate mission to activate Earth's last line of defense, Scott received the urgent transmission. His eyes darted between the tactical display, showing the charging Eliani superweapon, and the swarm of enemy ships still bearing down on him. In that moment, Scott made a decision. "Admiral," he called over the comm, "I'm going to buy us some time." Before Chen could respond, Scott pushed his ship's engines to their limit, plotting a direct course for Commander Yuna's flagship. The ancient vessel surged forward, weaving through enemy fire as it closed the distance to its target. Scott's eyes hardened as the massive Eliani flagship filled his viewport. The fate of Earth, of all humanity, rested on what happened in the next few moments. As he prepared for his daring and potentially suicidal attack run, Scott could only hope that somewhere on the planet below, Captain Reeves and his team would find and activate the hidden defense system in time. The space around Scott's ship crackled with energy as he approached the Eliani superweapon. In the back of his mind, he couldn't help but wonder, Would this be humanity's final stand, or the beginning of a new chapter in their forgotten legacy among the stars? Scott's eyes narrowed as he focused on the massive Ileani flagship looming before him. His hands gripped the controls tightly, squeezing hard with tension. The ancient ship responded to his every thought, its systems humming with power that seemed to resonate through his very being. As he approached the flagship, a storm of energy bolts and plasma bursts erupted from the Ileani fleet. Scott's vessel danced through the barrage, its advanced shielding flaring brilliantly with each impact. Warning indicators flashed across his control panel, but Scott paid them no heed. He knew he was pushing the ship to its limits, but there was no other choice. "Admiral," Scott called out over the comm, his voice tight with concentration, "I'm going to need some cover fire." "Roger that, Holmes," Chen's voice crackled back. "Delta and Echo provide supporting fire for Scott's approach. All other units engage the Ileani fleet and thin their numbers." The space around Scott lit up as the two other ancient ships unleashed a devastating barrage against the Ileani forces. Enemy vessels exploded in silent bursts of light and debris, creating a temporary corridor through which Scott could advance. On Earth, a stealth aircraft streaked low over the Sahara Desert, its engines barely a whisper in the night sky. Inside, Captain Jack Reeves and his team of Special Forces operatives prepared for deployment. "Remember, people," Reeves said, his voice gruff but steady, "our mission is to locate and activate the planetary defense system. Once we're on the ground, we'll have limited time before the Ileani detect our presence." The aircraft's bay doors opened, and Reeves led his team in a halo jump. They plummeted through the darkness, their specially designed suits allowing them to fall silently towards their target. As they neared the ground, they deployed their chutes, landing softly on the desert sands. Sergeant Wei Chen, the team's tech specialist, immediately activated their ground-penetrating radar. "Captain," he called out, his eyes fixed on the device's screen, "I'm picking up a large subterranean structure about 500 meters to the northeast." Reeves nodded. "Move out. Keep your eyes open for any Ileani patrols." As the team made their way across the dunes, Scott's ship closed in on Commander Yuna's flagship. The Ileani vessel was truly massive, dwarfing even the largest human spacecraft. Its hull bristled with weapon emplacements, and at its heart, Scott could see the pulsing glow of the Sunbreaker's superweapon. Scott's eyes darted across his tactical display, searching for a weakness. Suddenly, he noticed a pattern in the energy readings. "The power conduits," he muttered to himself. "They're exposed." Before he could formulate a plan of attack, a wall of Ileani ships began to form between him and the flagship. Commander Yuna's cold voice echoed across the comms. "Destroy that ship at all costs. The Sunbreaker must fire." Scott's mind raced. There was no way he could break through that defensive screen in time. Then his eyes fell on a previously unnoticed control interface. Something in his genetic memory stirred, and without fully understanding why, Scott activated the system. In a blinding flash of light, Scott's ship vanished from its position, reappearing directly above the Ileani flagship. The short-range teleportation had bypassed the entire defensive screen. "What the—" Scott gasped, momentarily disoriented by the sudden shift. But there was no time to marvel at the technology. The Sunbreaker was powering up, its energy readings spiking dangerously. Scott targeted the exposed power conduits and opened fire. Streams of energy lanced out from his ship, striking the vulnerable points with pinpoint accuracy. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Explosions rippled across the surface of the Ileani flagship, its hull buckling under the force of internal detonations. Meanwhile, in the Sahara, Reeves and his team had uncovered the entrance to the ancient facility. As they descended into the darkness, long-dormant systems sprang to life around them. Holographic interfaces flickered into existence, displaying information in a language none of them recognized. "Sergeant Chen," Reeves ordered, "see if you can make sense of this. The rest of you, secure the perimeter." Chen approached one of the interfaces, his fingers dancing across the holographic controls. To his surprise, the system seemed to respond to his touch, adapting its displays to a form he could understand. "Captain," Chen called out, excitement evident in his voice, "I think I've found the activation sequence for the defense system, but it's going to take some time to initialize." Reeves nodded grimly. Do it. We'll hold this position as long as we need to. Back in space, the Eliani fleet was in chaos. With their flagship crippled and Commander Yuna's fate unknown, their coordinated attack had devolved into individual ships fighting for survival against the technologically superior human vessels. Admiral Chen watched the battle unfold from the lunar base, a mix of hope and apprehension on his face. "Holmes," he called out, "status report." Scott's voice came back, breathless but triumphant. "Eliani flagship is down, sir, but we're not out of the woods yet. There are still hundreds of enemy ships out there." As if in response to his words, the surface of the Earth seemed to come alive. Massive silos hidden for millennia began to open, revealing swarms of sleek autonomous drones. They rose into the atmosphere in their thousands, streaking towards the battered Eliani fleet. Dr. Martinez burst into the command center, her eyes wide with excitement. "Admiral, you need to see this. The energy readings from those drones, they're using the same subspace power source as the ancient ships." Chen's eyes narrowed as he watched the drones engage the Eliani forces. For the first time since the invasion began, he allowed himself a small smile. "It looks like humanity's forgotten legacy might just save us all," he murmured. As the battle raged on, with Earth's newly awakened defenses turning the tide against the alien invaders, Scott couldn't help but wonder what other secrets lay hidden in humanity's past, and what challenges they might face in the future. Future might hold, but there was no time for such reflections now. The battle was far from finished. Scott's daring attack on Commander Yuna's flagship had thrown the Eliani fleet into disarray. The massive alien vessel now drifted listlessly in space, venting atmosphere and debris. Scott's ancient ship, though damaged, remained operational. He maneuvered away from the crippled flagship, putting some distance between himself and the chaos he had unleashed. "Holmes, fall back to a safe position," Admiral Chen's voice crackled over the comm. "Delta and Echo, engage the Eliani forces. Press our advantage while they're disorganized." Scott watched as the two other human ships surged forward, their weapons blazing with brilliant energy. The Eliani ships, caught off guard by the loss of their command vessel, struggled to mount an effective defense. On Earth, the awakening of the planetary defense system reached its crescendo. The ground trembled as hidden silos opened across the globe, releasing swarms of autonomous drones. Each drone, roughly the size of a small car, rose into the sky with a soft hum. They moved with uncanny precision, forming intricate patterns as they ascended through the atmosphere. In the Sahara facility, Captain Jack Reeves and his team worked feverishly to understand and control the ancient system they had activated. Sergeant Wei Chen's fingers flew across a holographic interface, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Captain," Chen called out, "I've found a way to input basic commands. We can direct the drone's efforts more effectively now." Reeves nodded, his eyes fixed on a three-dimensional map that had sprung to life before them. It showed Earth and the surrounding space in stunning detail, with the positions of all combatants clearly marked. The swarms of defense drones appeared as shifting clouds of light, engaging the Eliani ships in orbit. "Good work, Sergeant," Reeves said. "Prioritize defensive formations around major population centers. We need to prevent any Eliani from breaking through to the surface." As Chen input the commands, the map showed the drone swarms adjusting their patterns, creating an impenetrable shield around Earth's most vulnerable areas. Back on the lunar base, Dr. Emma Martinez burst into the command center, her eyes wide with excitement. "Admiral Chen, I've made a breakthrough in decoding the ancient database," she announced breathlessly. "There's a network of automated shipyards hidden throughout the solar system. They're capable of producing more ships, like the ones Scott and the others are piloting." Chen's eyes narrowed as he processed this information. "This could be the key to turning the tide," he murmured. He turned to his communications officer. "Get me Scott Holmes immediately." Moments later, Scott's face appeared on the main view screen. "Admiral," he said, his voice tight with tension, "what are your orders?" "Scott, we need you to locate and activate the nearest automated shipyard," Chen explained quickly. "Our data suggests there's one hidden in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Can your ship make it there?" Scott glanced at his damage readouts, then nodded grimly. "She's taken a beating, sir, but she'll hold together. I'm setting course for the asteroid belt now." As Scott's ship limped away from Earth, pushing its damaged systems to their limits, the situation on the planet's surface grew increasingly chaotic. With the immediate threat of orbital bombardment neutralized by the drone swarms, Earth's military forces began to rally. In New York, General Sarah Hawkins coordinated with her counterparts around the globe, establishing a unified command structure through the United Nations. "We need to prepare for potential ground assaults," she announced during an emergency video conference. "All available air and ground units should be on high alert." In orbit, Commander Yuna's escape pod docked with a secondary command ship. The Eliani leader's face was a mask of cold fury as she assessed the situation. "Our technological advantage has been compromised," she growled to her subordinates. "Prepare a new strategy. We'll establish ground bases on the planet's surface. Their population will become our leverage." As Yuna's orders spread through the remaining Eleni fleet, a portion of their forces began a desperate push towards Earth's surface. The drone swarms fought valiantly to repel them, but some Eleni craft managed to slip through the defensive screen. Scott's ship entered the asteroid belt, its sensors scanning for any sign of the hidden shipyard. Suddenly, an alert chimed, drawing his attention to an irregularly shaped asteroid emitting unusual energy signatures. "This has to be it," Scott muttered, carefully maneuvering his vessel closer to the camouflage structure. As he approached, he noticed what appeared to be a concealed entrance. "Now, how do I wake you up?" he wondered aloud, searching for any sign of an activation mechanism. Meanwhile, on Earth, the first wave of Eliani landing craft broke through the atmosphere. Multiple craft touched down in strategic locations across the globe, including the outskirts of major cities and key military installations. The scream of jets filled the air as Earth's air forces scrambled to engage the invaders. In the Sahara facility, Captain Reeves received an urgent transmission. "Captain, Eliani forces have been detected heading towards your location." The voice of General Hawkins crackled through the comm. "You need to secure that facility at all cost." Reeves turned to his team, his face grim. "You heard the general. Let's fortify this position. Chen, see if you can use any of this ancient tech to bolster our defenses." As the team rushed to prepare for the impending assault, Sergeant Chen stumbled upon a hidden chamber. His flashlight beam revealed a sleek humanoid form standing in the center of the room. "Captain," Chen called out, his voice filled with awe, "I think you need to see this." Reeves entered the chamber, his eyes widening as he took in the sight of the advance-powered exoskeleton. It stood silent and waiting, a testament to humanity's forgotten technological prowess. As Earth's forces engaged the Eliani ground troops in fierce battles across the globe, and Scott worked to activate the asteroid shipyard, the fate of humanity hung in the balance. The ancient legacy of their ancestors had provided them with unexpected advantages, but would it be enough to turn the tide against the alien invaders? Invaders. The ancient legacy of their ancestors had provided them with unexpected advantages, but would it be enough to turn the tide against the alien threat? Scott's damaged ship limped through the asteroid belt, its sensors straining to detect any sign of the hidden shipyard. As he maneuvered around a particularly large asteroid, his ship's computer chimed an alert. A faint energy signature pulsed from what appeared to be an irregularly shaped rock formation. "This has to be it," Scott muttered, carefully guiding his vessel closer to the camouflage structure. As he approached, he noticed what seemed to be a concealed entrance. The ship's systems detected a subtle change in the energy readings, and suddenly, a previously invisible docking port flickered into view. Scott's hands danced across the controls, allowing his instincts and the ship's interface to guide him. As he neared the port, a soft vibration ran through the hull. The shipyard had recognized the vessel's signature and was pulling it in. The vast dark hangar swallowed Scott's ship. Emergency lights sputtered to life, revealing rows upon rows of incomplete vessels and dormant robotic assemblers. Scott's breath caught in his throat as he took in the scale of the facility. Activating his suit's life support, Scott exited his ship into the airless environment. His footsteps echoed in the cavernous space as he approached a central control terminal. The console sprang to life at his touch, a holographic interface materializing before him. A beam of light swept over Scott's body, and he felt a familiar tingle as the genetic interface scanned his DNA. Access granted, the shipyard systems unfurled before him, in a dizzying array of data and controls. Meanwhile, on Earth, the situation had devolved into a full-scale ground war. Outside Washington, D.C., Major John Hawkins crouched behind the twisted wreckage of a car, his team spread out in hidden positions around him. The ruins of suburbia stretched out before them, the once peaceful neighborhoods now a battleground. "Delta Team, stand by," Hawkins whispered into his comm. "Epsilon, report status." "In position, sir," came the hushed reply. "Eleni patrol approaching from the east." Hawkins peered around his cover, spotting the alien soldiers moving cautiously down the debris-strewn street. Their armor gleamed in the late afternoon sun, a stark contrast to the crumbling buildings around them. "Wait for my signal," Hawkins ordered. He watched as the Eliani passed the trigger point they had set up earlier. "Now!" In a coordinated strike, Hawkins and his team opened fire from multiple angles. The Eliani, caught off guard, scrambled for cover. Two fell immediately, their armor no match for the humans' precisely aimed shots. The others returned fire, their energy weapons scorching the air. Hawkins rolled to a new position, shouting orders as he moved. His team flowed like water through the ruins, using their knowledge of the terrain to outmaneuver the aliens. It was a dance they had perfected over weeks of brutal combat. High above the Earth, Admiral Chen watched the global conflict unfold from his command center on the lunar base. Holographic displays showed the positions of the two remaining ancient ships, piloted by his daughter Sarah and Captain Rodriguez. "Echo 1, status report," Chen called out. Sarah's voice crackled over the comm, strained but determined. "Taking heavy fire, Admiral. Shields at 60% and falling." Chen's eyebrows furrowed as he watched the swarm of Eliani ships pursuing his daughter's vessel. "Echo 2, provide covering fire for Echo 1. Drone squadrons Delta through Kilo. Engage the enemy's flanking units." The space around Earth erupted in a dazzling display of weapons fire as the human ships executed a series of complex maneuvers. Their superior agility allowed them to dance through the Eliani formation, dealing significant damage while evading the worst of the alien attacks. But Chen could see the tide slowly turning against them. The sheer number of Eliani ships was overwhelming, and both human vessels were accumulating damage faster than they could repair. Back in the Sahara facility, Captain Jack Reeves gritted his teeth as the exoskeleton integrated with his nervous system. The pain was intense, but he forced himself to remain still as the suit calibrated itself to his body. Sergeant Chen monitored the process, his eyes darting between Reeves and the holographic readouts. "Integration at 85%, Captain. How are you holding up?" Reeves managed a tight smile. "I've had worse hangovers, Sergeant." As the final connections were made, Reeves felt a surge of power coursing through his body. He flexed his arms experimentally, marveling at the responsiveness of the suit. It was as if the exoskeleton had become an extension of his own body. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. Chen rushed to a nearby console, his face paling as he read the display. "Captain, we've got incoming. Eleni forces have found us." Reeves' eyes narrowed as he clenched his fists, feeling the suit's servos whine in response. "Then let's give them a proper welcome, Sergeant. Seal all entrances except the main one. We'll funnel them into a kill zone." As Chen relayed orders to the rest of the team, Reeves strode towards the facility's entrance, each step accompanied by the low hum of the exoskeleton's power systems. He could hear the distant sound of weapons fire growing closer. In orbit, Commander Yuna stood on the bridge of her new flagship, her eyes cold as she surveyed the tactical display. "Target Earth's major population centers," she ordered. "We'll force their surrender by threatening their civilians." As her fleet redeployed, focusing their firepower on the planet below, Yuna turned her attention to the human ships that had caused so much trouble. "All remaining battle groups, hunt down and destroy those ancient vessels. They are now our primary targets." In the asteroid shipyard, Scott worked feverishly at the control terminal. He had successfully activated the production systems, and the facility was humming with activity. Massive robotic arms moved with surprising grace, assembling ship components at an incredible pace. Scott pored over the database of ship designs, quickly assessing their capabilities and production times. He initiated the construction queue, prioritizing smaller, faster ships that could be completed quickly. Come on, Scott muttered, watching as the first of the new ships began to take shape. He knew that every second counted, that Earth's defenders were fighting and dying while he worked. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, driving him to push the ancient facility to its limits. As the battle raged across the solar system, Dr. Emma Martinez made a breakthrough on the lunar base. Her eyes widened as she deciphered a section of the ancient database, revealing information about a network of faster-than-light communication relays hidden throughout the system. "Admiral Chen," she called out, her voice filled with excitement. "I think I've found something that could change everything." Chen turned from the tactical displays, his eyebrow raised questioningly. Martinez quickly explained her discovery, watching as hope flickered in the Admiral's eyes. "If we can reactivate these relays," Martinez continued, "we might be able to call for help from other human colonies that survived. There could be others out there, Admiral." Chen nodded slowly, his mind racing with the implications. "Get to work on locating those relays, Doctor. We need to get them online as soon as possible." As Martinez returned to her work with renewed vigor, Chen turned back to the battle raging around Earth. He knew that every minute they could hold out increased their chances of survival. But as he watched another group of Eliani ships break through the drone defenses, he couldn't help but wonder if they had enough time left. In the skies above Mars, Lieutenant Sarah Chen fought to keep her damaged ship under control. Alarms blared in the cockpit as she initiated emergency landing procedures, the red planet's surface growing larger in her view screen. "Mayday! Mayday!" she called out, hoping her transmission would reach the lunar base. "This is Echo 1, attempting emergency landing on Mars. I've detected an anomalous energy signature beneath the surface. Possible cache of ancient tech. Will investigate if I survive the landing." As her ship entered the Martian atmosphere, trailing fire and debris, Sarah's eyes locked onto the coordinates of the energy signature. Whatever was down there, she knew it could be crucial to humanity's survival. She just had to reach it first. The ship shuddered violently as it plummeted towards the rust-colored landscape. Sarah's hands flew over the controls, fighting to keep the vessel from breaking apart. The ground rushed up to meet her, and she braced for impact, hoping against hope that she would live to uncover the secrets hidden beneath the Martian soil. Surface. As Sarah braced for impact, her ship skidded across the Martian landscape, kicking up a cloud of red dust. Miles away in the asteroid belt, Scott Holmes stood transfixed before the shipyard's holographic display. The first wave of newly constructed ships glided out of the facility, their sleek hulls gleaming under the distant sunlight. A surge of pride welled up in his chest, but it was quickly tempered by the gravity of the situation. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the control room. Scott's fingers flew across the console, pulling up the sensor readouts. His eyes widened as he registered the signature of an approaching Eliani scout ship. No, he muttered, his mind racing. If the Eliani discovered the shipyard, all their efforts would be for naught. Scott's gaze darted across the room, searching for a solution. Then he spotted it. A secondary control panel labeled Perimeter Defense. Without hesitation, Scott dashed to the panel and began inputting commands. The shipyard's advanced systems responded instantly, activating a network of concealed energy turrets embedded in nearby asteroids. On the main display, Scott watched as the turrets powered up, their targeting systems locking onto the unsuspecting Eliani vessel. A brilliant flash of light erupted in the void of space as the turrets opened fire. The Eliani scout ship, caught completely off guard, disintegrated in a spectacular explosion before it could transmit a single byte of data. Scott exhaled slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. He'd kept the shipyard safe, but he knew this was only the beginning. The Eliani would send more scouts, and eventually they would find him. He turned back to the production controls, determination etched on his face. They needed more ships, and fast. On Earth, the urban sprawl of Washington, D.C. had become a war-torn battlefield. Major John Hawkins crouched behind a crumbling concrete barrier, his rifle at the ready. He peered over the top, surveying the devastated cityscape before him. The once proud buildings of the nation's capital now stood as skeletal remnants, their windows shattered and walls pockmarked with weapons fire. "Delta Team, status report," Hawkins barked into his comm. "All clear on the western approach, sir," came the reply. Epsilon team has secured the Capitol building. Hawkins nodded, a grim smile playing across his lips. They were making progress, slowly but surely pushing the Eleni back. He turned to Sergeant Alex Foster, who was hunched over a portable computer terminal. "Any luck with that alien tech, Foster?" The tech expert's fingers danced across the keyboard, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Almost there, sir. Their encryption is tough, but I've seen tougher." Suddenly, Foster's eyes lit up. "I'm in? Sir, you're going to want to see this." Hawkins moved closer, peering over Foster's shoulder at the stream of alien data. As Foster decrypted and translated the information, Hawkins's expression grew increasingly grim. "They're planning to establish a massive ground base in Siberia," Hawkins muttered, his mind already racing with the implications. "Using the harsh environment as a natural defense against our counterattacks." He straightened up, his decision made. "Send this intel to command immediately. We need to stop them before they can entrench themselves." As Foster transmitted the data, Hawkins rallied his team. They had a city to secure, and now a new mission on the horizon. Thousands of miles away, in the sweltering heat of the Sahara, Captain Jack Reeves stood at the entrance of the ancient facility, the prototype exoskeleton humming with power around him. The suit's enhanced sensors picked up the approaching Eliani force long before they came into view. "All units, prepare for engagement," Reeves commanded, his voice steady despite the tension coursing through him. "Remember your training. We hold this line at all costs." The first wave of Eliani soldiers appeared on the horizon, their alien weapons charging with an ominous whine. Reeves took a deep breath, feeling the exoskeleton respond to his every movement. As the aliens opened fire, Reeves sprang into action. The suit's enhanced speed and strength allowed him to move with inhuman agility, dodging energy blasts and returning fire with pinpoint accuracy. His team watched in awe as their captain single-handedly held back the Elani advance. In the heat of battle, Reeves noticed something strange. Every time he came into contact with a piece of ancient technology in the facility, he felt a subtle resonance through the exoskeleton. Acting on instinct, he placed his hand on a nearby control panel. To his amazement, the panel lit up, responding to his touch. Reeves's mind raced as he realized the implications. The exoskeleton wasn't just a weapon, it was a key to unlocking the facility's full potential. With newfound purpose, Reeves fought his way deeper into the facility, activating dormant systems as he went. Ancient defense turrets sprang to life, force fields shimmered into existence, and long silent engines began to hum. As the facility awakened around them, the tide of battle began to turn. The Eliani, caught off guard by the sudden activation of the ancient defenses, found themselves outmatched and outgunned. Reeves stood at the heart of the facility, the exoskeleton interfacing seamlessly with the ancient systems. For the first time since the invasion began, he allowed himself a moment of hope. They had a chance now, a real chance to turn this war around. But as the last of the Eliani forces retreated from the facility, Reeves knew their victory was just the beginning. The real battle was still to come, and it would span not just the Earth, but the entire solar system and beyond. As Reeves surveyed the aftermath of the battle, his comm unit crackled to life with an urgent transmission from Admiral Chen. "Captain Reeves, we have a critical situation developing. I need you to prepare for immediate deployment to Siberia. A multinational task force led by Major Hawkins is en route to prevent the establishment of a massive Eliani base. Your exoskeleton's capabilities could be the key to their success." Reeves acknowledged the order, his mind already shifting to the new mission. Within hours, he found himself aboard a hypersonic aircraft, streaking across the sky towards the frozen wasteland of Siberia. As the aircraft approached the drop zone, Reeves performed a final systems check on his exoskeleton. The suit hummed with power, its advanced sensors already picking up traces of Eliani activity on the ground below. Without hesitation, Reeves leapt from the aircraft, the exoskeleton effortlessly compensating for the extreme conditions of the high-altitude jump. As he plummeted towards the Earth, he spotted the rest of Major Hawkins's team, their stealth transports barely visible against the stark white landscape. Meanwhile, in the asteroid belt, Scott Holmes received a similar transmission from Admiral Chen. The shipyard's holo display flickered as Chen's face appeared. Lines of worry etched deeply into his features. "Scott, we've detected a massive Ileani fleet searching the belt. You need to accelerate production while maintaining stealth at all costs. We're counting on you to build our fleet before they find you." Scott's fingers flew across the control panel, initiating new production sequences. The shipyard's robotic arms moved with increased urgency, assembling fighters, destroyers, and even carriers at a breakneck pace. As he worked, Scott's eyes constantly darted to the sensor readouts, watching for any sign of approaching Eleni ships. On Mars, Lieutenant Sarah Chen picked herself up from the wreckage of her ship, her body aching but her spirit unbroken. She made her way towards the source of the energy signature she had detected during her descent. As she approached a seemingly innocuous rock formation, a hidden entrance slid open, revealing a vast underground facility. Sarah stepped inside, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. As she explored deeper into the facility, she came across a central computer system. With trembling hands, she activated the ancient machine, and a holographic display sprang to life before her. Her eyes widened as she took in the information scrolling across the screen. "Terraforming protocols? Atmospheric processors? This is incredible," she breathed. Before she could delve further into the data, a noise from behind made her spin around, weapon at the ready. To her relief, she saw a familiar face. Captain Michael Rodriguez, who had followed her distress signal to Mars. "Looks like I'm just in time for the party," Rodriguez said with a grin, holstering his own weapon. "What have you found?" As Sarah explained her discovery, Rodriguez's expression grew serious. "If we can reactivate this technology, it could give humanity a crucial backup plan. Let's get to work." In the frozen expanse of Siberia, Major John Hawkins and his team moved silently across the tundra, their thermal camouflage rendering them nearly invisible in the harsh environment. As they crested a ridge, Hawkins raised a hand, signaling the team to halt. Before them, rising from the icy landscape, stood a massive Ileani structure. "My God," Sergeant Foster whispered, his eyes wide behind his tactical visor. "They've already started construction." Hawkins nodded grimly. "Then we'd better put a stop to it. All teams, prepare for engagement. We hit them hard and fast." As the task force moved into position, a blur of movement caught Hawkins' attention. He turned to see Captain Reeves touching down nearby, the exoskeleton absorbing the impact of his landing with ease. "Reporting for duty, Major," Reeves said, his voice slightly distorted by the suit's external speakers. "What's the plan?" Hawkins quickly briefed Reeves on the situation, outlining their strategy to disrupt the Eliani construction efforts. As they finalized their approach, the first rays of the Arctic sun began to creep over the horizon, glinting off the alien structure before them. In the Kuiper Belt, Dr. Emma Martinez and her team of engineers worked feverishly to reactivate the ancient faster-than-light communication relay. The small stealth ship that had brought them to this remote location hovered nearby, its sensors constantly scanning for any sign of Eliani patrols. "Power levels are stabilizing," one of the engineers reported, his voice tense with concentration. "Initiating startup sequence now." As the relay began to power up, Emma's heart raced. If they could bring this system online, they might be able to call for help from other human colonies that had survived the initial Eliani assault. But as the minutes ticked by, the risk of discovery grew. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the ship's comm system. "Multiple Eliani signatures detected," the pilot's voice crackled. "They're sweeping the area. We need to wrap this up fast." Emma's hands flew over the control panel, pushing the ancient technology to its limits. "Come on," she muttered, watching as the relay's systems slowly came to life. "Just a little more time." Back in the asteroid belt, Scott Holmes faced a critical decision. The first destroyer-class vessel was ready for launch, but the shipyard's sensors had just detected a squadron of Eliani warships closing in on their location. Scott's mind raced as he weighed his options, knowing that the choice he made in the next few moments could change the course of the entire war. His hand hovered over the launch controls as he watched the Eliani ships draw nearer on the tactical display. Time seemed to slow as Scott considered the consequences of each possible action. The fate of humanity's new fleet, and perhaps the entire war effort, hung in the balance as he prepared to make his decision. decision. With a deep breath, he activated the launch sequence for the newly completed destroyer-class vessel, the HSS Defiant. As the massive ship emerged from its concealed dock, Scott's fingers danced across the control panel, initiating a series of decoy beacons throughout the asteroid belt. The Defiant's engines flared to life, propelling it towards the incoming Eliani squadron. Scott remotely piloted the vessel, his heart racing as he watched the tactical display. The human ship closed the distance rapidly, its advanced energy weapons charging with a high-pitched whine. The Eliani ships, caught off guard by the sudden appearance of the Defiant, scrambled to form a defensive formation. But it was too late. The human vessel unleashed a barrage of energy beams, slicing through the hull of the lead Eliani ship. The alien vessel erupted in a spectacular explosion, sending debris scattering across the void. Scott allowed himself a grim smile as he maneuvered the Defiant through the chaotic battlefield. The ship's superior technology and Scott's expert piloting proved a lethal combination. A second Eliani vessel fell to the Defiant's onslaught, its systems overloaded by the human ship's weaponry. As the remaining Eliani ships regrouped, Scott activated the decoy beacons. Suddenly, the asteroid field lit up with dozens of false energy signatures, each mimicking a human vessel. The Eliani squadron's formation broke apart as they attempted to track the phantom targets. Back on Earth, Major John Hawkins and his multinational task force crouched in the shadow of a snow-covered ridge, overlooking the partially constructed Eliani base in Siberia. The alien structure loomed before them, its metallic surface gleaming in the Arctic sun. "All units prepare to engage," Hawkins whispered into his comm. He turned to Captain Jack Reeves, who stood nearby in his prototype exoskeleton. "You're up, Captain. Show us what that suit can do." Reeves nodded, the exoskeleton humming with power as he moved. With incredible speed, he sprinted towards the Eliani base, crossing the open ground in mere seconds. The suit's enhanced strength allowed him to leap over the outer defenses, landing in the midst of surprised Eliani guards. As Reeves engaged the enemy at close quarters, Hawkins signaled the rest of the team to advance. "Move in, target their power generators and communication arrays, use the intel from the comm hub to hit their weak points." The task force surged forward, taking advantage of the chaos created by Reeves's assault. Sergeant Foster led a team of tech specialists, their hacked Eliani data guiding them to critical systems. They planted explosive charges on key structural points, aiming to bring the entire base crumbling down. Hawkins coordinated the attack from a portable command center, using real-time data from orbital satellites and ground sensors. He watched as Reeves tore through the Eliani defenses, the exoskeleton allowing him to shrug off energy weapon blasts that would have vaporized an unprotected human. As the battle raged, Hawkins' comm unit crackled with an urgent transmission from the UN Council. "Major, we have a critical situation developing. Environmental monitoring stations are reporting rapid atmospheric changes worldwide. The Eliani terraforming efforts have accelerated beyond our worst projections." Hawkins cursed under his breath. They needed to neutralize this base quickly and move on to the next phase of the counteroffensive. "Understood, Command. We'll wrap this up ASAP and prepare for the next stage." He switched channels to address his team. "All units, double time it. We need this base offline in the next 10 minutes. Reeves, target their atmospheric processing equipment. We can't let them continue modifying our planet." In the asteroid belt, Scott Holmes watched as the HSS Defiant continued to wreak havoc on the Eliani squadron. The human ship's energy weapons tore through alien shields with ease, while its advanced maneuverability allowed it to dodge most return fire. Suddenly, a new alert flashed on Scott's console. A massive Eliani fleet had just entered the system, led by a formidable command ship. Scott's blood ran cold as he recognized the tactical signature of Commander Yuna, the most feared Eliani strategist in the war. Scott's mind raced as he assessed the situation. The Defiant was holding its own against the initial squadron, but it couldn't hope to stand against Yuna's entire fleet. He needed to buy more time for the shipyard to complete its next wave of vessels. With a series of quick commands, Scott reconfigured the decoy beacons, creating the illusion of a full human battle group converging on the Eliani fleet's position. He then sent a coded burst transmission to the Defiant, instructing it to execute a series of pre-programmed evasive maneuvers. As Yuna's fleet approached, Scott received a priority communication from Admiral Chen. The Admiral's face appeared on the holo display, his expression a mixture of willpower and urgency. "Scott, we have a plan to turn this war around," Chen began, his voice tight with tension. "We're going to take the fight directly to the Eliani homeworld. I need you to modify your production queue immediately. We'll need ships capable of long-range interstellar travel and heavy combat." Scott's eyes widened at the audacity of the plan. "Understood, Admiral. I'll get right on it. But we have a situation here. Commander Yuna has arrived with a substantial fleet. I'm not sure how long we can maintain our cover." Chen nodded grimly. "Do what you can to hold them off. We're coordinating with our teams on Mars and Europa. If everything goes according to plan, we'll have some surprises for the Eliani soon." As the transmission ended, Scott turned his attention back to the tactical display. The Defiant was performing admirably, using the asteroid field for cover, as it continued to harass the Eliani forces. But Yuna's fleet was closing in, and Scott knew it was only a matter of time before they discovered the true location of the shipyard. With revitalized commitment, Scott began reprogramming the shipyard's production queue. As he worked, he kept one eye on the battle unfolding around him, knowing that the fate of humanity might well depend on his ability to complete these new ships before Yuna's forces overwhelmed their defenses. The shipyard's massive fabrication arrays hummed to life, beginning construction on a new class of vessel designed for the daring assault on the Eliani homeworld. Scott watched the progress bars slowly filling, acutely aware of the Eliani fleet drawing ever closer. It would be a race against time, with the future of the human race hanging in the balance. As he prepared to make his decision. Scott's fingers flew across the control panel, initiating the launch sequence for the HSS Defiant. The newly completed destroyer-class vessel emerged from its concealed dock, its sleek hull gleaming in the dim light of the asteroid belt. As the ship's engines flared to life, Scott activated a series of decoy beacons throughout the surrounding area, creating a web of false signals to confuse the approaching Eliani forces. The Defiant surged forward, closing the distance to the Eliani squadron with astonishing speed. Scott's heart raced as he remotely piloted the vessel, pushing its advanced systems to their limits. The human ship's energy weapons charged with a high-pitched whine, ready to unleash their devastating power. Caught off guard by the sudden appearance of the Defiant, the Eliani ships scrambled to form a defensive formation. But it was too late. Scott directed a barrage of energy beams that sliced through the hull of the lead Eliani ship, causing it to erupt in a spectacular explosion. Debris scattered across the void as Scott maneuvered the Defiant through the chaotic battlefield, his expert piloting proving a lethal combination with the ship's superior technology. A second Eliani vessel fell to the Defiant's onslaught, its systems overloaded by the human ship's weaponry. As the remaining Eliani ships regrouped, Scott activated the decoy beacons. Suddenly, the asteroid field lit up with dozens of false energy signatures, each mimicking a human vessel. The Eliani squadron's formation broke apart as they attempted to track the phantom targets. Just as Scott allowed himself a moment of satisfaction, a priority communication from Admiral Chen appeared on his holo display. The Admiral's face was a mask of willpower as he spoke. "Scott, we have a plan to turn this war around," Chen began, his voice tight with urgency. "We're going to take the fight directly to the Eliani homeworld. I need you to modify your production queue immediately. We'll need ships capable of long-range interstellar travel and heavy combat." Scott's eyes widened at the audacity of the plan. "Understood, Admiral. I'll get right on it. But we have a situation here. Commander Yuna has arrived with a substantial fleet. I'm not sure how long we can maintain our cover." Chen nodded grimly. "Do what you can to hold them off. We're coordinating with our teams on Mars and Europa. If everything goes according to plan, we'll have some surprises for the Eliani soon." As the transmission ended, Scott turned his attention back to the tactical display. The Defiant was performing admirably, using the asteroid field for cover as it continued to harass the Eliani forces. But Yuna's fleet was closing in, and Scott knew it was only a matter of time before they discovered the true location of the shipyard. With renewed focus, Scott began reprogramming the shipyard's production queue. He prioritized the creation of long-range assault carriers and stealth frigates designed for deep space operations. The massive fabrication arrays hummed to life, beginning construction on these new vessels designed for the daring assault on the Eliani homeworld. Scott also initiated the manufacturing of specialized boarding craft, anticipating the need for ground assaults on Eliani installations. As he worked, he kept one eye on the battle unfolding around him, acutely aware of the approaching Eliani fleet. The HSS Defiant continued its hit-and-run tactics, drawing Eliani forces away from the hidden shipyard. Commander Yuna, growing increasingly frustrated with the elusive human ship, ordered her fleet to use wide-range energy weapons to indiscriminately destroy large swaths of the asteroid field. The tactic threatened to expose the shipyard's location, forcing Scott to accelerate his production and evacuation plans. As Scott raced against time, coordinating the shipyard's efforts while remotely piloting the Defiant, he received another incoming transmission. This time, it was from the lunar base. The excited voice of Dr. Eliza Wong, the lead scientist, filled the comm channel. Scott, we've made a breakthrough," she exclaimed. "We've discovered coordinates for a network of hidden jump gates spread throughout the solar system. They're remnants of the forgotten human civilization, and they could allow for rapid deployment of forces across vast distances." Scott's mind raced with the possibilities. "That's incredible, Dr. Wong. Have you informed Admiral Chen?" "Yes, he's already ordered recon missions to locate and reactivate these jump gates," she replied. "If we can get them operational, it could change everything." As Scott processed this new information, he watched the progress bars of the new ships slowly filling on his display. The shipyard's production capacity was being pushed to its limits, but the first of the new vessels would soon be ready for deployment. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the command center. Scott's eyes snapped to the tactical display, where he saw a group of Eliani warships breaking off from the main fleet and heading directly towards the shipyard's location. They had managed to penetrate the asteroid field's natural camouflage and the network of decoys. Scott's fingers flew over the controls, initiating emergency protocols. He began powering up the newly completed ships, preparing them for immediate launch. The unfinished vessels would have to be abandoned, but he was determined to save as much of the fleet as possible. As the Eliani warships closed in, Scott made a split-second decision. He set the HCS Defiant on a collision course with the lead Eliani ship, programming it to detonate its reactor core upon impact. It was a desperate move, but one that might buy enough time for the new ships to escape. With a heavy heart, Scott watched as the Defiant, the ship that had single-handedly held off the Eliani fleet, streaked towards its final target. The explosion that followed was blinding, temporarily disorienting the approaching Eliani forces. In that moment of chaos, Scott launched the first wave of completed ships from the shipyard. Long-range assault carriers and stealth frigates burst from their concealed docks, their engines flaring as they accelerated away from the asteroid field. As Scott prepared to evacuate the command center, he received one last transmission from Admiral Chen. "Scott, we've just gotten word from our team on Europa. They've secured the weapon capable of generating controlled singularities. It's time to begin the next phase of our counteroffensive." Scott nodded, a grim smile forming on his face. "Understood, Admiral. I'm on my way with our new fleet. Let's take this fight to the Eliani." With that, Scott initiated the shipyard's self-destruct sequence and boarded the last remaining vessel. As his ship rocketed away from the asteroid field, he watched the massive explosion behind him, knowing that the next stage of the war was about to begin. The fate of humanity now rested on their ability to strike at the heart of the Eliani Empire, and Scott was determined to see it through. The fate of humanity now rested on their ability to strike at the heart of the Eliani Empire, and Scott was determined to see it succeed. As his ship accelerated away from the rapidly disintegrating asteroid field, Scott's mind raced with the enormity of the task ahead. The shipyard's destruction had bought them precious time, but he knew it wouldn't be long before the Eliani regrouped and resumed their pursuit. Scott opened a secure channel to the fleet of newly completed vessels that had launched just moments before. "This is Commander Holmes to all ships. Form up on my position and prepare for immediate warp jump." A chorus of acknowledgments filled the comm channel as the advanced human vessels fell into formation. Scott took a moment to admire the sleek lines of the long-range assault carriers and the barely visible outlines of the stealth frigates. These ships represented humanity's best hope for survival, and he felt a surge of pride at what they had accomplished in such dire circumstances. As the fleet prepared to jump, Scott initiated a data transfer to a secure backup facility hidden within a hollowed-out comet at the edge of the asteroid belt. He watched the progress bar tick upward, knowing that the production data and blueprints it contained were just as crucial to humanity's survival as the ships themselves. Data transfer complete, the ship's AI announced just as the warp drives began to power up. Scott nodded in satisfaction. Initiate jump sequence. The fleet vanished in a burst of blue-white light, leaving behind the chaos of the asteroid field and reappearing in the vast expanse of space between Mars and Jupiter. Scott immediately began coordinating with the other ship captains, implementing a complex series of maneuvers designed to confuse any pursuing Eliani forces. As they regrouped, Scott received an incoming transmission from Admiral Chen. The Admiral's face appeared on the console, his expression a mixture of relief and drive. "Excellent work, Scott," Chen said. "I've just received word that our ground forces on Earth have begun a major counteroffensive. Major Hawkins and Captain Reeves are leading the charge, and they're making significant progress against the Eliani occupation." Scott's eyes widened at the news. "That's incredible, Admiral. How are they managing to break through the Eliani defenses?" Chen's lips curved into a slight smile. "It seems that prototype exoskeleton of Reeves's is proving to be a game-changer. They're able to breach Eliani energy shields and fortifications with unprecedented effectiveness." As Scott processed this information, another alert flashed on his console. "Admiral, I'm picking up a transmission from Europa. It's Commander Carter's team." Chen nodded. "Put it through." The view screen split, showing a grainy image of Commander Jackson Carter. The man looked exhausted but triumphant. "Admiral, Commander, we've secured the Singularity weapon. We're en route to the moon now, but we've got Eliani scouts on our tail." "Understood, Commander," Chen replied. "We'll have reinforcements waiting for you. Get that weapon to the lunar facility at all costs." As the transmission ended, Scott turned his attention back to his fleet. The ships were performing admirably, their advanced systems allowing them to outmaneuver and outfight any Eliani pursuers they encountered. But he knew they couldn't keep this up indefinitely. Suddenly, a new transmission came through, this time from Dr. Emma Martinez in the Kuiper Belt. Her face appeared on the screen, excitement evident in her eyes. "Scott, Admiral, I've made contact with Nova Terra," she exclaimed. "They've sent us technical specifications for advanced shield and weapon systems. I'm transmitting the data to you now." Scott's fingers flew over his console as he received the incoming data stream. His eyes widened as he scrolled through the schematics. "This is incredible," he muttered. "With these upgrades, we might actually stand a chance against the Eliani fleet." As Scott began implementing the new designs into his ship's systems, another alert sounded. This time, it was Lieutenant Sarah Chen and Captain Michael Rodriguez reporting from Mars. "We've reactivated the planet's ancient defense systems," Sarah announced. "We've discovered a network of orbital platforms capable of generating a powerful energy field around the entire planet." Admiral Chen leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Excellent work, Lieutenant. That could provide us with a fallback position if Earth becomes untenable." As Scott continued to coordinate the movements of his fleet and oversee the implementation of the new Nova Terra upgrades, a sense of cautious optimism began to take hold. For the first time since the Eliani invasion began, it felt like humanity was finally starting to turn the tide. But their newfound hope was short-lived. An urgent transmission from the asteroid belt cut through the comm chatter. "Commander Holmes, this is Scout Ship Hermes. We've detected a massive Eliani assault force heading your way. It's Commander Yuna's fleet, and they've locked onto your position." Scott's teeth clenched as he processed the information. He had known this moment would come, but he had hoped for more time to prepare. "Understood, Hermes. Get out of there now." Turning to his fleet, Scott began issuing rapid-fire orders. "All ships, this is Commander Holmes. Prepare for immediate combat. Stealth frigates, activate your cloaking devices and move to flank the enemy. Assault carriers, form up on my position. We're going to punch right through their lines." As the human fleet moved into position, the first wave of Eliani ships appeared on their long-range scanners. Scott took a deep breath, steeling himself for the battle to come. He opened a channel to his flagship, the newly completed HFY Avenger. This is Commander Holmes to all hands on the Avenger. Prepare for combat. Today, we show the Eliani what humanity is truly capable of. The massive Dreadnought-class vessel hummed with power as its advanced weapon systems came online. Scott watched as the rest of his fleet fell into formation around the Avenger, ready to face the oncoming Eliani assault. As the two fleets closed in on each other, Scott knew that the outcome of this battle could very well determine the fate of humanity. With the upgrades from Nova Terra, the Singularity weapon en route to the moon, and the reactivation of the ancient jump gates, they had a fighting chance. But first, they had to survive this encounter with Commander Yuna's forces. Scott gripped the arms of his command chair, his eyes fixed on the tactical display as the first shots were fired. The space between the two fleets erupted in a dazzling display of energy weapons and explosions. The battle for humanity's survival had begun in earnest, and Scott was determined to see it through to the end. The battle raged on, energy weapons crisscrossing the void between the human and Eliani fleets. Scott's ships danced through the chaos, their new upgrades from Nova Terra proving their worth as they outmaneuvered and outgunned their alien opponents. But even as his fleet held its own against Commander Yuna's forces, Scott knew they couldn't keep this up indefinitely. They needed a game-changer, and fast. As if in answer to his unspoken plea, a priority message flashed on his console. It was from Dr. Wong, her face appearing on the screen, excitement evident in her eyes despite the clear exhaustion etched on her features. Commander Holmes, we've done it. We've pinpointed the location of a jump gate near Saturn. If we can reach it and get it operational, we could turn the tide of this battle. Scott's mind raced with the possibilities. A functional jump gate could allow them to outflank the Eliani, potentially even striking at their homeworld. It was a risk, but one they had to take. Understood, Doctor. Transmit the coordinates to the fleet. We're making our move. Scott opened a channel to his ships. All vessels, this is Commander Holmes. We've located a jump gate near Saturn. Form up on the Avenger. We're punching through their lines. The human fleet coalesced around Scott's flagship, their formation tightening as they prepared for a desperate push. The Avenger's engines flared to life, its massive form accelerating towards a gap in the Eliani forces. As they approached Saturn, its majestic rings filling the view screens, Scott felt a glimmer of hope. But that hope was short-lived as alarms blared across the bridge. "Commander!" his tactical officer shouted. "The jump gate, it's unstable. Energy readings are off the charts." Scott gritted his teeth. They were so close he couldn't let this opportunity slip away. "Bring us in closer. We need to dock with the control station." The Avenger maneuvered alongside the ancient structure, its size dwarfing even the massive human dreadnought. As they established a connection, Scott turned to his chief engineer. "Get over there and see what you can do. We need that gate operational, whatever it takes." As his engineering team scrambled to board the control station, Scott's attention was pulled back to the battle. Commander Yuna's forces had regrouped and were bearing down on them, using Saturn's complex gravitational field to execute maneuvers that would have been impossible in open space. "All ships, defensive formation Delta," Scott ordered. "Protect the jump gate at all costs." The space around Saturn erupted into a furious melee. Human and Eliani ships weaved between the planet's rings, using the debris as cover and to mask their movements. The advanced weaponry of Scott's fleet gave them an edge, but the Eliani's superior numbers were starting to tell. On the jump gate's control station, Scott's engineering team worked feverishly to stabilize the ancient systems. The chief engineer's voice crackled over the comm, strained and urgent. "Commander, we've managed to reduce the energy fluctuations, but the gate's still not fully operational. We need more time." Scott watched as another of his ships erupted in a ball of fire, overwhelmed by Eliani attackers. They were running out of options. "Do what you can. We'll hold them off as long as possible." As the battle raged around Saturn, Scott received an incoming transmission from Earth. Major Hawkins's face appeared on the screen, his features set in iron will. "Commander Holmes, we've received intel on a critical Eliani target. There's a hidden command bunker in the Amazon coordinating their ground operations. Reeves and I are leading a team to take it out. Scott nodded, understanding the importance of the mission. Good luck, Major. We'll do our best to keep their space forces occupied. As the transmission ended, Scott's tactical officer called out, Sir, long-range sensors are picking up a massive energy signature. It's an Eliani reinforcement fleet, at least twice our size. Scott's heart sank. They were already struggling against Yuna's forces. If this new fleet reached them before the jump gate was operational, it would be over. In that moment of crisis, Scott made a decision. He opened a channel to the fleet. This is Commander Holmes. Deploy the experimental weapons. All ships, prepare to engage. As his ships began to power up the untested technology, Scott silently hoped it would be enough. The fate of humanity now rested on the success of this desperate gamble. The space around Saturn lit up with new, alien energies as the human fleet unleashed their experimental weapons. The Eliani ships, caught off guard by the unfamiliar technology, began to falter, but the reprieve was short-lived as they quickly adapted their tactics. Scott watched the tactical display, his mind racing through scenarios. They needed more time, but the incoming Eliani reinforcements were closing fast. Just as he was about to order a last desperate stand, his chief engineer's voice came through the comm. Commander, we've stabilized the jump gate, but there's a problem. The power systems are operating at reduced capacity. We can't send the entire fleet through at once. Scott's mind focused as he realized the implications. They would have to split their forces, leaving some behind to defend the gate while others pushed forward. It was a tactical nightmare, but they had no choice. As he prepared to give the order, Scott's gaze swept over the battle raging around him. Human ingenuity against alien might, fighting for survival among the rings of Saturn. Whatever came next, he knew this moment would be etched in the annals of human history, if they survived to write it. In that moment, Scott made his decision. All ships, this is Commander Holmes. Prepare for Operation Bifrost. I repeat, Operation Bifrost is a go. The human fleet immediately began to split into two groups. Scott watched as the tactical display reorganized, showing a smaller elite force preparing to traverse the jump gate, while the larger group formed a defensive perimeter around it. Captain Ethan Stark, you have command of the advance team, Scott ordered. Take the HSS Thunderbolt and your task force through the gate. Gather all the intelligence you can on the Eliani homeworld. We'll hold the line here. Understood, Commander. Stark's voice crackled through the comm. We won't let you down. As the Thunderbolt and its accompanying ships approached the jump gate, Scott turned his attention to the looming threat. The massive Eliani reinforcement fleet was closing in fast, its numbers dwarfing the human defenders. All ships, this is Commander Holmes. Deploy experimental weapons. I repeat, deploy experimental weapons. Scott watched as his ships powered up the untested technology. The space around Saturn suddenly lit up with alien energies as gravity manipulation devices and energy phase disruptors came online. The effect was immediate and devastating. Eliani ships caught in the localized gravity distortions began to tear apart, their hulls crumpling like paper. Others, hit by the phase disruptors, erupted in brilliant explosions as their shields failed to stop the penetrating energy. Sir, his tactical officer called out, the experimental weapons are highly effective, but they're draining our power reserves at an alarming rate. Scott nodded grimly. Understood. All ships, ration your use of the new weapons. Use them only when you have a clear shot. As the battle raged, Scott's attention was drawn to a new threat. Commander Yuna's flagship had moved into position, revealing a massive energy projector aimed at Saturn's rings. Evasive maneuvers, Scott shouted, but it was too late. The Eliani superweapon fired, its energy beams striking Saturn's iconic rings. The beautiful structures began to break apart, sending waves of debris hurtling in all directions. All ships, take shelter behind Titan, Scott ordered, guiding the Avenger towards Saturn's largest moon. The human fleet raced against time, barely managing to reach the safety of Titan's shadow before the debris storm hit. As ice and rock pelted the moon's far side, Scott began formulating a new strategy. The destruction of Saturn's rings had created a chaotic battlefield, one that could work to their advantage. Listen up, he addressed his fleet. We're going to use this debris field to our advantage. Form into small, mobile strike teams. Hit-and-run tactics only. Use the debris for cover and strike when the enemy least expects it. As his orders were carried out, Scott received an incoming transmission from Earth. Major Hawkins's face appeared on the screen, his expression a mix of triumph and urgency. Commander, we've infiltrated the Eliani command bunker in the Amazon, Hawkins reported. We've uncovered their global strategy and the location of their primary planetary shield generator. Scott's mind raced with the implications of this information. Excellent work, Major. Get that data to Admiral Chen immediately. As the transmission ended, Scott turned his attention back to the battle. The human fleet, now organized into nimble strike teams, darted through the debris field. They used the chunks of ice and rock as cover, emerging to unleash volleys from their experimental weapons before disappearing again into the chaos. The Eliani forces, caught off guard by these guerrilla tactics, struggled to respond effectively. Their superior numbers became a hindrance in the cluttered space around Saturn, with many of their ships colliding with debris or each other as they tried to pursue the elusive human vessels. Scott watched from the bridge of the Avenger as his plan unfolded. The experimental weapons, used sparingly but with deadly precision, continued to wreak havoc on the Eliani fleet. Yet he knew they were still vastly outnumbered, and their power reserves were dwindling. Just as it seemed the human defenders might be overwhelmed, a priority message flashed on Scott's console. It was from Dr. Martinez in the Kuiper Belt. Commander Holmes, her excited voice came through. Long-range scans have detected the Nova Terra fleet. They're using some kind of advanced space-folding technology. At their current speed, they'll reach our solar system within hours. A spark of hope ignited in Scott's chest, but he tempered it with caution. They still had to hold out until reinforcements arrived. Understood, Doctor. Relay that information to Admiral Chen. We'll hold the line here as long as we can. As Scott refocused on the battle, he saw the HSS Thunderbolt and its task force successfully enter the jump gate. A brilliant flash of light engulfed the ships, and then they were gone, off to gather crucial intelligence on Eliani territory. With renewed drive, Scott guided his fleet through the treacherous debris field around Saturn. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, and he was determined to give humanity every possible chance for survival. As the battle raged on, Scott knew that similar struggles were unfolding across the solar system, each one vital to their ultimate victory. The HSS Avenger shuddered as another Eliani energy blast grazed its shields. Scott gripped his command chair, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The debris field around them continued to grow denser, creating an ever-changing maze of obstacles and opportunities. He knew that the next few hours would be the decisive factor in the battle for Saturn and humanity's future. As debris from the shattered rings pelted the Avengers' shields, Scott's mind raced through potential strategies. The chaotic environment around them had become both a blessing and a curse. Human ships, more agile and adaptable, weaved through the treacherous maze of ice and rock with practiced precision. Scott watched as a nearby frigate executed a perfect barrel roll, narrowly avoiding a massive chunk of debris before unleashing a barrage of experimental weaponry on an unsuspecting Eliani cruiser. All ships, maintain current hit-and-run tactics, Scott ordered. Use the gravity manipulators to redirect larger debris towards Eliani vessels. Let's make this planetary graveyard work for us. The effect was immediate and devastating. Human ships utilized their gravity manipulators to hurl enormous chunks of Saturn's former rings at the Eliani fleet. The alien vessels, caught off guard by this unorthodox tactic, suffered significant damage as ice boulders the size of small moons crashed into their hulls. Commander Yuna's voice crackled over the comm, her tone filled with frustration and anger. You think you can hide in this debris field forever, humans? We will crush you like the insects you are. Scott ignored the taunt, focusing instead on the tactical display. He noticed a shift in the Eliani fleet's formation. They're splitting up into smaller squadrons, he muttered to himself, trying to match our maneuverability. As if on cue, the space around Saturn erupted into a series of intense skirmishes. Human and Eliani ships engaged in close-quarters combat, weaving through the debris field in a deadly dance of energy weapons and experimental technology. "Sir," his tactical officer called out, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Chen." Scott's heart raced as he opened the channel. Chen's face appeared on the screen, his expression a mix of excitement and urgency. "Commander Holmes, we've received critical intelligence from multiple fronts. The Thunderbolts team has uncovered valuable data on Eliani fleet movements. Major Hawkins is coordinating a global strike against their primary shield generator on Earth. But most importantly, we've discovered a network of ancient defense platforms hidden throughout the solar system." Scott's eyes widened as he processed the information. "Defense platforms? How is that possible?" "No time to explain fully," Chen replied. "We're sending you coordinates for one of these platforms. It's located in Saturn's upper atmosphere. Activating it could turn the tide of this battle decisively in our favor." As the coordinates flashed across his screen, Scott realized the magnitude of the decision before him. Reaching the platform meant navigating through the densest part of the debris field and exposing the Avenger to concentrated Eliani fire. "Sir," his helmsman interrupted, "Eliani forces are regrouping. They're preparing for another assault." Scott took a deep breath, weighing his options. The current hit-and-run tactics were effective, but they weren't enough to secure a definitive victory. The ancient defense platform represented a gamble, a high-risk, high-reward scenario that could potentially end the battle in one swift stroke. "Helm, plot a course for those coordinates," Scott ordered, his voice steady despite the gravity of his decision. "All ships, this is Commander Holmes. We're making a push for a hidden defense platform in Saturn's atmosphere. I need every available ship to provide cover fire. This is our chance to end this." As the Avenger changed course, plunging deeper into the debris field, Scott opened a channel to his chief engineer. "I need everything you've got. Reroute all non-essential power to shields and engines." The ship surged forward, its enhanced shields deflecting smaller chunks of debris, while the helmsman skillfully navigated around larger obstacles. Behind them, the rest of the human fleet formed a protective barrier, engaging the Eliani forces to keep them at bay. "Eliani ships in pursuit," the tactical officer reported. "They're concentrating their fire on our aft shields." The Avenger shuddered as energy blasts impacted its rear defenses. Scott gripped his chair, watching as the debris field grew denser, the swirling clouds of Saturn's upper atmosphere now visible ahead. "Distance to the platform?" Scott asked, his voice tense. 2,000 kilometers and closing," the helmsman responded. "We're entering Saturn's upper atmosphere now." The view outside the bridge windows changed dramatically. The dark void of space gave way to swirling clouds of ammonia and hydrogen, punctuated by brilliant flashes of lightning. The Avenger's hull groaned under the increased atmospheric pressure. "Sir, we're detecting a massive energy signature directly ahead," the science officer called out. "It matches the coordinates provided by Admiral Chen." As they pushed through a particularly dense cloud layer, Scott's breath caught in his throat. There, suspended in Saturn's turbulent atmosphere, was a massive structure unlike anything he had ever seen. Its design was clearly of human origin, yet it possessed an otherworldly quality that spoke of technological advancements far beyond their current capabilities. "Bring us alongside," Scott ordered. "Prepare to dock and deploy the engineering team." As the Avenger maneuvered into position, the pursuing Eliani ships broke through the cloud cover behind them. Energy blasts lit up Saturn's atmosphere, creating a dazzling and terrifying light show. "Engineering team ready for deployment," the chief engineer reported. "But sir, we have no idea how to activate this platform. It could take hours to decipher its systems." Scott's mind raced. They didn't have hours. Every second they spent exposed in Saturn's atmosphere brought them closer to destruction. As he prepared to give his next order, a blinding flash of light erupted from the platform, engulfing the Avenger and filling the bridge with an otherworldly glow. Scott shielded his eyes, momentarily blinded by the intense radiance. As his vision cleared, he saw the platform pulsing with energy, its ancient systems coming to life. "Sir, the platform is activating on its own," his chief engineer exclaimed. "It's responding to our presence." Scott's mind raced with the implications. This was their chance to turn the tide of the battle, but they needed to act fast. "All hands, prepare for defensive maneuvers," Scott ordered. We're going to make a push for that platform. The Avenger surged forward, its engines straining against Saturn's turbulent atmosphere. Behind them, the rest of Scott's small fleet formed a tight formation, their weapons primed and ready. As they descended deeper into the gas giant's swirling clouds, the sensors lit up with multiple contacts. A group of Eliani ships, having anticipated their move, burst through a dense layer of ammonia clouds, energy weapons blazing. "Evasive action!" Scott shouted as the bridge rocked from a near miss. "Return fire and continue pushing towards the platform." The human vessels scattered, using the planet's violent storms as cover. Lightning arced between clouds, illuminating the battlefield in brief, stroboscopic flashes. The Avenger rolled to avoid a massive chunk of ice, only to be buffeted by gale-force winds that threatened to tear the ship apart. "Hull integrity at 82% and falling," the chief engineer reported. "These atmospheric conditions are hell on our shields." Scott gritted his teeth, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The ancient platform loomed ahead, a beacon of hope in the chaotic maelstrom of Saturn's upper atmosphere. But between them and their goal, Commander Yuna's forces were closing in, their superior numbers threatening to overwhelm Scott's small fleet. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Captain Hoffman," the communications officer announced. Scott nodded and Hoffman's face appeared on the main screen, distorted by interference from the storm. "Commander, we've noticed Yuna's diverting a significant portion of her fleet to your position," Hoffman reported. "We're taking advantage of the opening, launching a coordinated assault on their weakened lines now." "Good work, Captain," Scott replied. "Keep the pressure on them. We'll handle things down here." As the transmission ended, Scott turned his attention back to the battle at hand. The Avenger shuddered as another energy blast grazed its shields, the impact reverberating through the ship's hull. "All ships form up on me," Scott ordered. "We're going to make a run for that platform. Concentrate all fire on creating a path through their lines." The human vessels tightened their formation, their experimental weapons lashing out at the Eliani ships. Beams of concentrated energy cut through the stormy atmosphere, finding their marks with deadly precision. Several alien vessels exploded, their debris pulled down by Saturn's immense gravity. As they closed in on the platform, Scott could see its massive structure more clearly. Ancient symbols and geometric patterns adorned its surface, pulsing with an otherworldly energy. The closer they got, the more active the platform became, as if awakening from a long slumber. "Sir, we're within docking range," the helmsman reported. "Bring us alongside," Scott ordered. "Prepare the engineering team for immediate deployment." The Avenger maneuvered into position, extending its docking clamps to secure itself to the ancient structure. As soon as they made contact, the platform's energy output spiked dramatically. "Engineering team, you're cleared to board," Scott announced. "Find out how to fully activate this thing and do it fast. We'll hold off the Eleni as long as we can." As the engineers rushed to decipher the platform's systems, the space around them erupted into chaos. Yuna's forces, realizing the potential threat, redoubled their efforts to stop the humans. Energy beams crisscrossed the turbulent skies, while Saturn's violent weather added an unpredictable element to the battle. Scott's remaining ships formed a defensive perimeter around the platform, engaging the Eliani in close-quarters combat. The confined space within Saturn's atmosphere made the fighting especially treacherous, with destroyed vessels plummeting into the gas giant's depth. "Commander," the tactical officer called out, "we're detecting a massive energy buildup within the platform. Whatever it's doing, it's happening now." Scott watched as the ancient structure began to pulse with increasing intensity. Arcs of energy danced across its surface, reaching out to touch the human ships. To his amazement, instead of damaging them, the energy seemed to be enhancing their shields and weapon systems. "Sir, our power output has just doubled," the chief engineer reported in disbelief. "The platform is interfacing with our systems, upgrading them somehow." A fierce grin spread across Scott's face as he realized the true potential of their discovery. "All ships, press the attack. Let's show the Eliani what these upgrades can do." The human vessels surged forward, their enhanced weapons tearing through the alien defenses with unprecedented power. Yuna's forces, caught off guard by this sudden shift in the battle's dynamics, began to falter and retreat. As the fighting intensified, Scott received another transmission, this time from Admiral Chen on the lunar base. "Commander Holmes, we're receiving reports from all fronts," Chen said, his voice filled with urgency. "Major Hawkins has breached the Ileani shield generator on Earth, and Dr. Whitmore has made a breakthrough with Mars's defense systems. But we've also detected a massive Ileani fleet mobilizing from their homeworld. Whatever you're doing at Saturn, we need it operational now. The fate of humanity may well rest on that platform." Scott nodded grimly, understanding the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. As he prepared to respond, a blinding flash erupted from the platform, engulfing the Avenger and the surrounding space in a sea of pure energy. The battle for Saturn, and perhaps the future of humanity, had entered its most critical phase. Cutting off Admiral Chen's transmission. The Avenger's systems flickered and died, plunging the bridge into darkness. For a heart-stopping moment, Scott thought they'd been hit. Then as suddenly as it had vanished, power returned. "Status report!" Scott barked, blinking away the afterimages. "All systems coming back online, sir," his tactical officer responded. "But the Ileani ships appear to be drifting." Scott's eyes snapped to the view screen. True enough, the enemy vessels hung motionless in Saturn's swirling atmosphere, their weapons silent. "The platform," Scott breathed. "It must have released some kind of electromagnetic pulse. Engineering, what's our status with the activation sequence?" "Sir, you're not going to believe this," the chief engineer's voice crackled over the comm. "The pulse seems to have triggered something. Systems are coming online faster than we can track them. This isn't just a defense platform. It's manipulating gravity itself." Scott's mind raced with the implications. "Can we control it?" "Affirmative, sir. We're interfacing with the main systems now." A plan formed in Scott's mind. "Create a localized gravity well. Let's trap these Ileani ships while they're vulnerable." As his crew worked to implement the order, Scott watched in awe as the space around them began to distort. The Ileani vessels, previously drifting, now struggled against an invisible force pulling them towards a central point. "Gravity well established, sir," the tactical officer reported. "Ileani ships are caught in the effect." "All vessels, this is Commander Holmes," Scott broadcast to his fleet. "The Ileani are trapped. Press the attack." The human ships surged forward, their weapons finding easy targets in the disoriented Ileani fleet. Explosions blossomed in the Saturnian sky as ship after ship succumbed to the onslaught. As the battle raged, Scott received an urgent transmission from Earth. Major Hawkins's face appeared on the screen, his expression a mix of exhaustion and triumph. "Commander, we've done it," Hawkins reported. "We've captured the Ileani shield generator in the Sahara. But there's more. The antimatter reactor powering it can be repurposed to boost Earth's defenses." Scott's eyes widened. "Excellent work, Major. Have you informed Admiral Chen?" "Affirmative. He's already ordered the integration of the Ileani tech into our defense grid. Dr. Martinez is overseeing the operation." Before Scott could respond, another transmission cut in. This time, it was Lieutenant Sarah Chen from Mars orbit. "Commander Holmes, we've made a breakthrough," she said, her voice urgent. "The Martian defense systems include a network of satellites capable of generating a planetary shield. We're bringing it online now, and we believe we can modify it to protect Earth as well." Scott felt a surge of hope. Things were finally turning in humanity's favor. But his elation was short-lived as Admiral Chen's grim face appeared in a split-screen transmission. "Commander, we've detected a massive Ileani fleet entering the system," Chen reported. "It's larger than anything we've encountered before, led by their Supreme Commander, Zarkax. I'm initiating Operation Starburst. Your orders are to use that gravity platform to disrupt their formation as they pass through the outer system." Scott nodded, his mind focused. "Understood, Admiral. We'll be ready." As the transmission ended, Scott turned to his crew. "You heard the Admiral. Let's show these Ileani what this platform can really do." The bridge erupted into action as Scott's team worked to reconfigure the gravity controls. Outside, the battle for Saturn continued, but Scott's mind was already focused on the larger threat approaching. "Sir," his science officer called out, "I'm detecting a new group of ships entering the system. They don't match any known Eliani configurations. Scott frowned, checking the data himself. His eyes widened as he recognized the signature. It's the Nova Terra fleet, he breathed. They've arrived. As if on cue, a transmission came through. The face of Admiral Ilara Stormborn filled the screen, her expression fierce and determined. "Commander Holmes," she said, her voice carrying the authority of a leader used to command. "The NTS Vanguard and her battle group are en route to your position. Hold the line. We're bringing the fight to the Eliani." Scott felt a renewed surge of energy. With the Nova Terra fleet's arrival, the activation of the ancient defenses, and the capture of Eliani technology, they had a real chance of victory. "All hands," Scott called out, his voice steady and determined. "Prepare for the largest battle in human history. Today we fight not just for Earth, but for the entire solar system." As his crew acknowledged the order, Scott turned his gaze to the swirling clouds of Saturn. Somewhere out there, beyond the gas giant's magnificent rings, the Eliani invasion fleet was approaching. And when it arrived, humanity would be ready. The Avengers' engines roared to life, pushing the ship higher into Saturn's atmosphere. Around them, the remaining human vessels fell into formation, their hulls still glowing from the platform's energy enhancement. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, "we're receiving targeting data from the Nova Terra fleet. They're positioning themselves to create a kill box as the Eliani pass through the outer system." Scott nodded, his fingers dancing over the gravity controls. "Prepare to initiate a system-wide gravitational disturbance on my mark. Let's give Zarkax a welcome he won't soon forget." As the combined human fleet took up their positions, the first wave of Eliani ships began to appear on long-range scanners. The battle for the solar system was about to begin, sending ripples of anticipation through the assembled human forces. Scott's fingers flew over the controls of the Saturn defense platform, his mind racing with calculations and strategic possibilities. As the first Eliani ships entered the outer solar system, he initiated the gravity manipulation sequence. "Activating gravitational disturbance now," Scott announced, his voice steady despite the tension in his muscles. The ancient structure beneath them hummed with power, and for a moment the space around Saturn seemed to warp and twist. Then, with a surge of energy that made the Avengers' sensors flare, the platform unleashed a series of powerful gravitational waves. The effect was immediate and devastating. The incoming Eliani fleet, a massive armada that had appeared unstoppable just moments before, suddenly found itself caught in a maelstrom of conflicting gravitational forces. Ships veered wildly off course, their carefully planned formation disintegrating into chaos. "My God," breathed Scott's tactical officer, watching the long-range sensors. "They're colliding with each other." Scott allowed himself a grim smile. "Now's our chance. All ships, engage the enemy. Let's show them what humanity can do." The combined human fleet surged forward, led by the Avenger and Admiral Stormborn's NTS Vanguard. Enhanced weapons fire lanced out, striking the disoriented Eliani vessels with deadly precision. As the battle intensified around Saturn, Scott received an urgent transmission from Earth. Dr. Emma Martinez's face appeared on the screen, her expression a mix of excitement and urgency. "Commander Holmes," she said, her words coming rapidly, "we've made a breakthrough with the Eliani antimatter technology. There's a weakness in their shield designs, a specific frequency that maintains cohesion. If we can disrupt it, we might be able to disable their shields across the entire fleet." Scott's mind raced with the possibilities. "Send us the frequency data. We'll coordinate with the fleet to exploit this weakness." As Martinez's team transmitted the information, Scott relayed the news to Admiral Stormborn and the rest of the human forces. The battle strategy shifted, with ships now targeting specific points on the Eliani vessels to maximize the effect of the shield disruption. The space around Saturn became a storm of weapons fire and explosions as the two fleets clashed. Eliani ships, their shields faltering under the precisely targeted assault, fell to human weapons in increasing numbers. But the alien forces were vast, and for every ship destroyed, more seemed to take its place. Suddenly, a new threat emerged. Massive energy beams lanced out from specialized Eliani ships, streaking past the battle lines and striking Mercury and Venus. The impacts were visible even from Saturn, causing visible distortions in the planet's surfaces. "Sir," Scott's science officer called out, her voice tight with concern, "those beams are altering the planet's orbits. If they hit Earth with that kind of power—" Scott nodded grimly. "Relay the information to Admiral Chen. We need to take out those planet-killer ships before they can target Earth." As if in response to his words, a priority transmission came through from Admiral Chen. "Commander Holmes, we're deploying the Singularity device. Your mission is to clear a path for the delivery ship and ensure it reaches its target." "Understood, Admiral," Scott replied. He quickly reorganized his forces, creating a spearhead formation to punch through the Eliani lines. The unmanned vessel carrying the experimental weapon streaked forward, protected on all sides by human ships. Eliani interceptors swarmed around them, trying desperately to stop the device's advance. In the midst of the chaotic battle, Scott noticed something strange. A group of Eliani ships had broken away from the main fleet and were moving to intercept their own interceptors. Before he could process this unexpected development, a transmission cut through the comm chatter. "Human forces, this is Captain Zelthor of the Eliani Resistance," a gravelly voice announced. "We oppose Zarkax's regime and seek to end this war. Allow us to assist you in deploying your weapon." Scott hesitated for a split second, weighing the risks and potential benefits of this unexpected alliance. Then, making a snap decision, he responded, "Acknowledged, Captain Zelthor. Coordinate with our forces to protect the delivery ship." With the addition of the Eliani resistance fighters, the path to the target opened up. The Singularity device pressed forward, closing in on its designated deployment zone. As the battle raged around him, Scott received one final transmission from Admiral Chen. "Commander, we have new intelligence from the Eliani resistance. There's a critical weak point on Zarkax's flagship. I need you to assemble a strike team for a high-risk infiltration mission. This could be our chance to end this war." Scott's mind raced with the implications of this new order. He quickly scanned the battlefield, assessing which of his officers could be spared for such a crucial mission. As he began formulating a plan, the Singularity device neared its target, promising to unleash a force that could turn the tide of the entire battle. The fate of Earth, and perhaps the entire solar system, now balanced on a knife's edge. Scott knew that the next few moments would determine whether humanity would rise to meet this unprecedented challenge or fall before the Eliani onslaught. With a deep breath, he prepared to make the decisions that would shape the course of the war. Scott's mind raced as he processed Admiral Chen's latest order. The opportunity to strike at the heart of the Eliani command was too crucial to ignore, even in the midst of the chaotic battle unfolding around Saturn. "Lieutenant Park," Scott called out, his voice steady despite the tension. "You have the con. Continue coordinating our efforts with the Novaterra fleet and the Eliani resistance. I need to assemble a strike team." "Aye, sir," Park responded, sliding into the command chair as Scott stood. Scott quickly made his way to the shuttle bay, his mind already cycling through potential candidates for this high-risk mission. As he entered the bustling hangar, he spotted Major Derek Frost, a grizzled veteran of countless covert operations, overseeing the loading of supplies onto a stealth shuttle. "Major Frost," Scott called out, striding towards him, "I need your expertise for a critical mission. We're infiltrating Zarkax's flagship." Frost's eyes widened slightly, but he nodded without hesitation. "I'm in, Commander. What's the plan?" As Scott briefed Frost on the mission parameters, he scanned the hangar for other suitable team members. His gaze fell on Lieutenant Amelia Zhao, a brilliant tech specialist he'd worked with on previous operations. "Zhao," Scott waved her over, "we need your skills for a high-priority infiltration. Are you up for it?" Zhao jogged over, her face set with persistence. "Absolutely, sir. Whatever you need." Over the next few minutes, Scott assembled the rest of his team. Sergeant Maria Delgado, an expert in close-quarters combat, Corporal Chen Wei, a demolition specialist, and Private First Class Jackson Moore, whose marksmanship skills were unparalleled. As the team gathered around Scott for a final briefing, the hangar bay doors slid open, revealing a familiar face. Captain Ethan Stark strode in, his expression grim but determined. "Commander Holmes," Stark called out as he approached, "I heard about the mission. I've got intel from the abandoned Eliani outpost that could be crucial for your infiltration." Scott nodded, relief washing over him. Stark's knowledge could be the edge they needed to succeed. Welcome aboard, Captain. We leave in 5. As the team made final preparations, Scott received a transmission from Dr. Emma Martinez on Earth. Her face appeared on the hangar's communication screen, excitement evident in her eyes. Commander, we've done it, Martinez reported. We've cracked the Eliani's shield frequency. I'm transmitting the data now. This should give your weapons a significant advantage against their defenses. Scott felt a surge of hope. Excellent work, Doctor. This could be the breakthrough we need. With the new data uploaded to their systems, Scott and his team boarded the stealth shuttle. The sleek vessel, a marvel of human engineering, enhanced with reverse-engineered Eliani tech, hummed to life as they strapped in. As the shuttle lifted off from the HSS Avenger, Scott took one last look at the battle raging around Saturn. The human fleet, bolstered by the Nova Terra reinforcements, was holding its own against the Eliani forces. The ancient defense platform continued to wreak havoc on enemy formations, its gravity manipulation capabilities proving invaluable. The shuttle streaked away from Saturn, its stealth systems engaged as it made its way towards the heart of the Eliani fleet. Through the viewport, Scott could see flashes of weapons fire and explosions illuminating the vast darkness of space. "Sir," Frost called out from the co-pilot seat, "I'm picking up a transmission from the Eliani resistance. They're providing us with a safe corridor through the battle lines." Scott nodded, feeling a mix of gratitude and wariness at this unexpected alliance. "Acknowledged. Let's hope their intel on Zarkax's flagship is as good as their navigation." As they approached the massive Eliani command ship, the true scale of the battle became apparent. Earth's orbital defense grid, newly enhanced with Eliani antimatter technology, was unleashing devastating barrages against the incoming fleet. Ancient weapon platforms, reactivated by Major Hawkins and Captain Reeves, added their firepower to the mix. In the distance, Mars glowed with an eerie light, its newly activated planetary shield deflecting a massive energy beam from one of the Eliani planet-killer ships. The sight sent a chill down Scott's spine, a stark reminder of the power they were up against. "We're approaching the flagship," Zhao reported from her station. "Stealth systems holding steady, no signs of detection yet." Scott leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the looming behemoth before them. Zarkax's flagship was a city in space, overflowing with weapons and defenses. Somewhere within that labyrinth of alien technology was their target, and perhaps the key to ending this war. "All right, team," Scott said, his voice low and focused. "We've got one shot at this. Let's make it count." As the stealth shuttle maneuvered towards a concealed docking port, identified by the Eliani resistance, Scott couldn't help but feel the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. The fate of Earth, of the entire solar system, could hinge on the success of this mission. The shuttle touched down with barely a whisper, its advanced landing gear absorbing any telltale vibrations. As the team performed final equipment checks, Scott received one last transmission from Admiral Chen. "Commander," Chen's voice crackled through the comm, "the Singularity device is nearing its deployment zone. Whatever happens on that flagship, know that you've given humanity a fighting chance. Godspeed." Scott acknowledged the message, then turned to his team. With a nod, he activated the airlock. As the door hissed open, revealing the alien corridors of Zarkax's flagship, Scott took a deep breath. The most dangerous phase of their mission was about to begin. The tension in the air was palpable as Scott and his team stepped into the alien corridor. The interior of Zarkax's flagship was a maze of sleek biomechanical design. Pulsing energy conduits lined the walls, casting an eerie blue glow that seemed to shift and dance as they moved. Scott signaled for silence and the team fell into formation, weapons at the ready. They had barely taken a few steps when the ship lurched violently, nearly throwing them off balance. Through the viewport at the end of the corridor, they caught a glimpse of the chaos unfolding outside. The debris field surrounding the flagship was a treacherous obstacle course of twisted metal and shattered hulls. "Stark, take point," Scott whispered, gesturing towards the shuttle's controls. "Your experience from the recon mission might be our best chance at getting through this mess." Stark nodded grimly and slid into the pilot's seat. His hands danced across the controls with practiced ease as he guided the shuttle through the wreckage. The team held their breath as they narrowly avoided a massive chunk of what appeared to be a destroyed Eleni cruiser. "Hold on," Stark called out, his voice tense. "We've got company." A pair of Eliani patrol ships emerged from behind a drifting debris cloud, their sensors sweeping the area. Scott's heart raced as he watched Stark expertly maneuver the shuttle behind a larger piece of wreckage, using it as cover. "Major Frost," Scott said, turning to the veteran operative, "now would be a good time to test out that new cloaking device." Frost nodded and activated the system. The shuttle's exterior seemed to shimmer for a moment before becoming nearly transparent, blending seamlessly with the surrounding space. The patrol ships passed by without a second glance, their sensors unable to penetrate the advanced cloaking technology. As they neared the flagship's outer defense perimeter, Lieutenant Zhao's voice cut through the tense silence. "Commander, I'm detecting a weak point in their sensor grid. If we time it right, we can slip through undetected." Scott gave the order, and Stark guided the shuttle through the narrow gap in the flagship's defenses. They approached a rarely used maintenance airlock, hidden away from the main hangar bay's heavy security. Once docked, the team quickly disembarked, using specialized cutting tools to breach the outer hull. The airlock hissed open, revealing the vast interior of Zarkax's vessel. Scott took a deep breath, knowing that their next actions could determine the fate of humanity. "All right, team," he said, his voice low but firm. "We split up here. Frost, take Zhao and Chen. Your objective is to sabotage the main reactor and weapon systems. The rest of you are with me. We're heading for the bridge." As the team prepared to part ways, a soft sound from nearby caught their attention. Scott raised his hand, signaling for everyone to freeze. From behind a panel of pulsing circuitry, a slender figure emerged. The alien's iridescent skin shimmered in the low light, its large, multifaceted eyes regarding them with a mix of fear and dedication. "Wait," the alien said in accented English. "I am Technician Lyra. I'm part of the resistance movement. I can help you." Scott hesitated, his weapon trained on the unexpected arrival. "Prove it," he demanded. Lyra's fingers danced across a nearby console, bringing up a holographic display of the ship's layout. "The quickest route to the bridge is through the auxiliary power conduits," she explained, highlighting a path on the map. "I can guide you past the internal security measures." After a moment's consideration, Scott nodded. "All right, Lyra, you're with us. But make no mistake, one wrong move and this alliance ends." With Lyra's guidance, the team navigated the labyrinthine interior of the flagship. They moved swiftly through dimly lit corridors and maintenance shafts, avoiding patrolling guards and automated security systems. The aliens' insider knowledge proved invaluable as they bypassed locked doors and deactivated alarm triggers. As they progressed deeper into the ship, the distant sounds of battle filtered through the hull. Explosions reverberated through the structure, and the occasional violent shudder suggested direct hits from human weapons. "The singularity device must have activated," Stark muttered as they paused at an intersection. "Let's hope it's causing as much havoc as we planned." Frost's team split off, heading towards the engineering section. Scott watched them disappear down a side passage before turning his attention back to their primary objective, reaching the bridge and neutralizing Zarkax. The central command section loomed before them, a fortress within the already formidable flagship. Multiple layers of security and heavily armed guards protected the approach to Zarkax's inner sanctum. "This is it," Scott said, surveying the final obstacles between them and their target. "Lyra, any last insights before we breach?" The alien resistance member pointed to a small access panel near the floor. "That leads to a maintenance crawlway. It will bypass the main security checkpoints and bring you out behind the guard station." Scott nodded, then turned to his team. "We've got one shot at this. Everything we've fought for comes down to the next few minutes. Let's make them count." As they prepared to make their final push, Scott couldn't help but think of the battles raging across the solar system. He hoped that their actions here, in the heart of the enemy command, would turn the tide of the war. With a deep breath, Scott gave the signal. The team moved into position, ready to breach the final defenses, separating them from Zarkax. The fate of Earth and all of humanity hung in the balance as they prepared to confront the Eliani Supreme Commander. "Commander, The fate of Earth and all of humanity hung in the balance as they prepared to confront the Eliani Supreme Commander. Scott nodded to his team, signaling their final approach. They moved swiftly through the maintenance crawlway, their bodies tense with anticipation. The narrow passage vibrated with the distant sounds of battle, a constant reminder of the chaos unfolding beyond the flagship's hull. As they neared the exit, Lyra whispered, "The guard station is just ahead. Once we're through, it's a straight shot to the command center." Scott acknowledged with a quick hand signal. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. With practiced precision, he tapped a sequence on his wrist computer, activating the last of Lyra's hacked access codes. The panel slid open silently, revealing the back of the guard station. Two Eliani soldiers stood at attention, their backs to the human infiltrators. Scott moved first, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to take down both guards before they could raise an alarm. "Move!" he hissed, and the team poured out of the crawlway. They sprinted down the final corridor, their footsteps muffled by the ship's constant hum. Ahead loomed the imposing security doors of the central command section, their surface pulsing with energy fields. Stark quickly attached a device to the control panel, its screen flickering with rapidly changing Eliani symbols. "Lyra's codes are working," he muttered, "but they've got some heavy encryption. This might take a minute." Scott nodded, keeping his eyes on the corridor behind them. "Make it quick. We don't have much time." The seconds ticked by, agonizingly slow. Just as Scott was about to order a more forceful approach, the device beeped softly. The massive doors began to slide apart with a low hiss. "Breaching charges, now!" Scott ordered. His team moved with practiced efficiency, setting shaped explosives at key points around the opening doors. As soon as the gap was wide enough, Scott triggered the detonation. The charges blew inward, creating a storm of smoke and debris that preceded their entry. Scott led the charge, bursting through the haze with his weapon raised. The scene that greeted him was one of controlled chaos. Zarkax stood at the center of the expansive command center, surrounded by a phalanx of elite guards. The Eliani Supreme Commander was a towering figure, encased in sleek battle armor that pulsed with terrifying energy. "Humans," Zarkax's voice boomed, a mixture of contempt and surprise evident in his tone. "Your persistence is admirable, misguided, but admirable." Scott didn't waste time on words. He opened fire, his reverse-engineered Eliani weapon spitting bolts of energy towards the Supreme Commander. His team fanned out, engaging the elite guards in a fierce close-quarters battle. The confined space of the command center quickly filled with the acrid smell of ozone and the sharp reports of short-range firearms. Energy weapons proved unwieldy in such close proximity, forcing both sides to rely on hand-to-hand combat and more conventional arms. Scott found himself locked in a deadly dance with Zarkax. The Eliani leader's battle armor gave him enhanced strength and speed, but Scott's own augmentations and training allowed him to hold his own. They traded blows and energy blasts, weaving between control consoles and holographic displays. "Your species is doomed, human," Zarkax taunted as he deflected one of Scott's attacks. "Even now my fleet tears through your defenses. Earth will fall, just as countless worlds before it have fallen." Scott gritted his teeth, refusing to be baited. He pressed his attack, looking for any weakness in Zarkax's defenses. The fate of humanity rested on his ability to take down the Eliani Supreme Commander. As the battle on the bridge raged, Major Derek Frost and his sabotage team were facing their own challenges deep within the flagship. They had successfully reached the main reactor room, a cavernous chamber dominated by a pulsing core of energy. "Plant the charges," Frost ordered, his voice tense. "We need to disable their power systems without causing a meltdown." His team worked swiftly, placing explosive devices at key structural points around the reactor. They were nearly finished when a shout echoed through the chamber. "Intruders! Stop them!" A patrol of Eliani engineers had discovered their presence. Frost cursed under his breath as energy bolts began to streak across the reactor room. His team scrambled for cover, returning fire as they tried to complete their mission. "Zhao, Chen, finish planting those charges," Frost barked. "The rest of you, with me. We need to hold this position." A tense firefight erupted in the confined space of the reactor chamber. Frost's team used the complex machinery as cover, trying to keep the Eliani forces at bay while their comrades finished their sabotage work. Back on the bridge, Scott could feel the tide of battle starting to turn. His team's superior training was beginning to show as they steadily pushed back Zarkax's guards, but the Supreme Commander himself remained a formidable opponent. As they grappled near a bank of control panels, Scott caught a glimpse of a tactical display. His eyes widened as he saw the devastation being wrought on the Eliani fleet around Earth. Dr. Martinez's counter-frequency technology was proving its worth, allowing human weapons to tear through Eliani shields with unprecedented effectiveness. Zarkax followed Scott's gaze, a flicker of concern crossing his alien features. "Impossible," he growled, redoubling his attacks with renewed fury. Scott felt a surge of hope. Humanity was holding its own, perhaps even gaining ground, but he knew the war was far from won. Everything hinged on his ability to neutralize Zarkax and take control of the flagship. With a burst of commitment, Scott pressed his attack. He feinted left, then dropped low, sweeping Zarkax's legs out from under him. The Supreme Commander stumbled, his armor clanging against the deck plates. Scott seized the moment, bringing his weapon to bear on Zarkax's exposed neck joint. But before he could take the shot, a violent shudder ran through the ship. Alarms began to blare as the lights flickered ominously. In the reactor room, Major Frost allowed himself a grim smile. The charges had detonated successfully, crippling the flagship's power systems. But their victory came at a cost. Their exit was cut off by Eliani reinforcements, leaving them trapped in the rapidly destabilizing chamber. Frost made a split-second decision. "Everyone out now," he shouted to his team. "I'll cover your retreat and ensure the reactor goes critical." As his team hesitated, Frost's voice softened for a moment. "It's been an honor serving with you all. Now go. Make sure this sacrifice counts for something." On the bridge, Scott struggled to maintain his footing as the ship lurched beneath him. He knew time was running out. With Zarkax momentarily disoriented, Scott prepared for one final decisive confrontation with the Eliani Supreme Commander. "Commander." With Zarkax momentarily disoriented, Scott prepared for one final decisive confrontation with the Eliani Supreme Commander. Seizing the opportunity, Scott lunged forward, his captured Eliani energy weapon humming with power. He aimed for a weak point in Zarkax's battle armor, a small gap near the shoulder joint. The weapon discharged, releasing a burst of searing energy that struck its target with pinpoint accuracy. Zarkax roared in pain and fury as his armor crackled and sparked. The damage was significant, compromising the integrity of his protective shell. Enraged by this unexpected turn of events, the Eliani leader abandoned all pretense of strategy and charged at Scott with unbridled ferocity. The two combatants clashed in a whirlwind of strikes and counterstrikes. Scott's augmented reflexes allowed him to narrowly avoid Zarkax's crushing blows, while the Supreme Commander's damaged armor hindered his movements just enough to give Scott an edge. As they grappled across the command center, the ship suddenly lurched violently. Alarms blared with renewed intensity, and the lighting flickered ominously. Scott knew instinctively that Frost's team had succeeded in their mission to sabotage the reactor. The flagship's power systems began to fail in cascading sequence. Artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, causing both Scott and Zarkax to momentarily lose their footing. Control panels sparked and died, plunging sections of the bridge into darkness. Scott's mind raced, looking for a way to use this chaos to his advantage. He spotted a damaged section of the bulkhead, weakened by the earlier breaching charges and the ongoing stress on the ship's structure. With a surge of adrenaline, Scott maneuvered the fight towards this vulnerable point. Zarkax, blinded by rage and unaware of Scott's strategy, pressed his attack. Scott allowed himself to be driven back, step by calculated step. As they neared the weakened bulkhead, Scott suddenly dropped low, using Zarkax's momentum against him. With a powerful kick to the alien's midsection, Scott sent the Supreme Commander crashing through the compromised section of the wall. The bulkhead gave way with a screech of tearing metal. Zarkax found himself suddenly exposed to the vacuum of space, his damaged armor unable to fully compensate for the abrupt change in pressure. The Eliani leader flailed desperately, trying to seal the breaches in his suit as the void of space threatened to claim him. Scott didn't hesitate. He reached for his equipment belt and retrieved a portable force field generator. With practiced efficiency, he activated the device, creating a shimmering bubble of atmosphere around himself and his team. The protective field expanded just in time to prevent them from being sucked out into the cosmic abyss. As Zarkax struggled against the unforgiving vacuum, Scott turned his attention to the rest of the bridge. The command center was in shambles, with most systems offline or malfunctioning. He spotted Lyra working feverishly at one of the few operational consoles. "Lyra!" Scott called out over the howling of escaping air. "Can you access the ship's communication systems?" The alien technician's fingers danced across the controls. "Yes, but we have limited power. What do you need?" Scott made his way to her side, careful to keep the force field generator active. "We need to broadcast a message to all Ileani frequencies. Let them know Zarkax has been defeated and call for their surrender." As Lyra worked to establish the communication link, Scott surveyed the scene outside the breach. The battle around Earth had taken a dramatic turn. With the flagship's reactor destroyed and its command systems offline, the Ileani fleet was in disarray. Earth's defense forces, bolstered by Dr. Martinez's counter-frequency technology, were tearing through the alien ships with unprecedented effectiveness. The view was awe-inspiring and terrifying in equal measure. Explosions bloomed silently in the void as Ileani vessels succumbed to the human counterattack. Debris from destroyed ships created a temporary ring of destruction around the planet, a grim monument to the cost of the conflict. "Communication channel open," Lyra announced, her voice strained but determined. Scott took a deep breath and began to speak, his words carried across the vast distances of space to every Ileani ship in the solar system. "Attention, all Ileani forces. This is Commander Scott Holmes of Earth's Defense Forces. Supreme Commander Zarkax has been defeated, and his flagship is under our control. Your invasion has failed. Power down your weapons and signal your surrender immediately. Any further resistance will be met with the full force of our combined fleets." As Scott's message echoed across Ileani frequencies, the response was immediate but varied. Many alien ships, their commanders realizing the futility of continued fighting, began powering down their weapon systems. Surrender signals flashed across the tactical displays, spreading like a wave through the Ileani fleet. However, a significant portion of the invading forces remained defiant. Whether out of disbelief, fanatical loyalty to Zarkax, or simple desperation, these ships continued to engage Earth's defense forces. Scott was about to issue further orders when a new alarm sounded from Lyra's console. The alien technician's eyes widened as she interpreted the data streaming across her screen. "Commander," she said, her voice filled with urgency, "long-range sensors are detecting a massive energy surge. It's coming from the direction of the Ileani homeworld." Scott felt a chill run down his spine. Even as victory seemed within grasp, a new and potentially catastrophic threat was emerging. He knew that whatever the Ileani had activated, it could only be a weapon of last resort, one capable of turning the tide of the entire war. As Scott contemplated their next move, the realization struck him. The battle for Earth might be won, but the war was just the beginning. The fate of humanity now hinged on their ability to neutralize this final, bold strategy from the Ileani homeworld. With commitment etched on his face, Scott turned to his team. "We need to figure out what that energy surge is and how to stop it. Lyra, see if you can access any information about Ileani superweapons from the ship's database. The rest of you, secure the bridge and prepare for potential counterattacks. We're not out of this fight yet." As his team sprang into action, Scott's mind raced with possibilities. Whatever the Ileani had unleashed, he knew that the next few hours would determine the future of not just Earth, but the entire solar system. With Zarkax's flagship under their control, they had a powerful asset at their disposal. If only they could unlock its secrets in time. With renewed urgency, Scott turned back to Lyra at the console. "We need more information on that energy surge," he said, his voice taut with tension. "Can you access the ship's long-range sensors?" Lyra's fingers flew across the alien controls, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Yes, I've got it. The sensors are picking up an enormous quantum disturbance originating from the Ileani homeworld." Scott leaned in, studying the data streaming across the screen. His eyes widened as the implications became clear. They're activating a quantum tunneling device, he breathed, the gravity of the situation settling over him like a lead weight. Without hesitation, Scott opened a secure channel to Admiral Chen at the lunar base. Admiral, we've got a critical situation. The Eliani are preparing to transport a significant portion of their remaining fleet directly to Earth's orbit using quantum tunneling technology. Chen's response was immediate and decisive. Understood, Commander. Initiating emergency protocol Aegis Shield. We're redirecting all available power to the planetary defense grid. It'll plunge much of the planet into darkness, but it's our best shot at boosting the orbital shields. As Scott acknowledged the order, he saw Lyra working furiously at another console. Commander, she called, I've accessed the ship's quantum communication system. We might be able to send a message directly to the Eliani homeworld. A plan began to form in Scott's mind. Good work, Lyra. Let's craft a message for the Eliani leadership. We'll detail Zarkax's defeat and the failure of their invasion. Include all the evidence we have of our technological advancements and the destruction of their fleet. Maybe we can convince them to call off this last-ditch effort. As they worked on the message, Scott's team secured the bridge and prepared for potential counterattacks. The damaged bulkhead had been sealed with emergency force fields, but the ship's systems were still in disarray. Suddenly, the flagship's sensors blared a new alert. Scott rushed to the main view screen, his heart racing. What is it? He demanded. Massive energy distortions forming between Earth and Mars, one of his officers reported. It's starting, sir. The quantum tunneling is underway. Scott's mind raced through their options. They couldn't stop the tunneling process entirely, but maybe they could disrupt it. Target those spatial distortions with all remaining weapons, he ordered. Continuous fire. Let's see if we can throw a wrench in their quantum calculations. The flagship's energy cannons roared to life, sending powerful beams into the forming anomalies. The space between Earth and Mars became a maelstrom of energy, the quantum field fluctuating wildly under the onslaught. As the battle unfolded, Scott received an incoming transmission from Earth. Dr. Emma Martinez's face appeared on the screen, her expression a mix of persistence and awe-inspiring excitement. Commander, we've repurposed the captured Eliani antimatter technology, she reported. We're creating a network of localized quantum disruption fields around Earth. It's untested, but it might destabilize their tunneling process. Scott nodded, hope flaring in his chest. Activate it immediately, Doctor. We'll take any edge we can get. As Martinez's team implemented their defense strategy, reports flooded in from across the solar system. Admiral Alara Stormborn was racing back from Saturn with her Nova Terra ships, abandoning her pursuit of the retreating Eliani forces to reinforce Earth's defenses. From Mars, Lieutenant Sarah Chen and Captain Michael Rodriguez made contact. Commander, Chen's voice crackled over the comm, we've stabilized the Martian shield. We're reconfiguring the ancient reactor to project a long-range energy beam towards Earth. It should supplement your planetary shields. Excellent work, Scott replied, feeling a surge of pride in humanity's unified response to the threat. The flagship shuddered as another volley of energy, beams lanced out towards the spatial distortions. Scott watched the view screen intently, his breath catching as the first Eliani ships began to materialize near Earth. But something was wrong. The ships flickered and distorted, their forms unstable as they struggled against the combined effects of the flagship's interference and Martinez's disruption fields. Some of the vessels seemed to tear apart mid-materialization, while others appeared with severe structural damage. It's working, Lyra exclaimed, her eyes wide with amazement. The quantum tunneling process is destabilized. They're coming through, but not intact. Scott allowed himself a small smile of triumph, but he knew the battle was a long way to go. The Eliani reinforcements were still arriving, damaged but dangerous. Earth's defenses were holding for now, but the strain was evident. As he prepared to coordinate the next phase of the defense, Scott cast his gaze towards the view screen once more. The space around Earth had become a chaos of energy discharges, quantum fluctuations, and battling ships. In the midst of this cosmic storm, the fate of humanity hung in the balance. Scott squared his shoulders, his voice steady as he addressed his team. This is it, people. Everything we've fought for comes down to the next few moments. Let's make them count. Count. Scott's words were cut short as the view screen erupted with a blinding flash of light. The first wave of LNE reinforcements had begun to materialize near Earth, but something was terribly wrong. "Status report," Scott barked, shielding his eyes from the intense glare. Lyra's fingers danced across the console, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Commander, the quantum tunneling process is destabilizing. The LNE ships, they're breaking apart as they arrive." Scott watched in amazement as the combined effects of their interference from Zarkax's flagship and Dr. Martinez's quantum disruption network created chaos in the arrival zone. Eliani vessels flickered into existence, their hulls warped and twisted by the spatial distortions. Many ships shattered upon materialization, while others appeared with gaping holes in their structures, atmosphere venting into the void. "It's working better than we could have hoped," Scott muttered, his mind racing with the implications. He opened a channel to Admiral Chen at the lunar base. "Admiral, the Eliani reinforcements are arriving in a compromised state. Now's our chance to strike." Chen's response was swift and decisive. "Understood, Commander. All Earth-based orbital defense platforms. Target those newly arrived ships. Fire at will." The view screen lit up once again, this time with the brilliant flashes of Earth's defense grid, unleashing its full fury. Energy weapons lanced out from orbital stations, while kinetic projectiles streaked across space. The vulnerable Eliani ships, still reeling from their disastrous arrival, stood little chance against the coordinated assault. Scott watched as dozens of enemy vessels erupted into fireballs or splintered into debris fields. The space around Earth became a graveyard of twisted metal and fractured hulls. Yet even as they celebrated this small victory, he knew the battle was far from finished. A new alert chimed on Lyra's console. "Commander, we're detecting a massive energy surge approaching from the direction of Mars." For a moment, Scott's heart sank, fearing another Eliani attack. But as the data streamed in, his expression changed to one of relief and admiration. "It's Lieutenant Chen and Captain Rodriguez," he announced to his team. "They've done it. They've activated the ancient Martian reactor." The long-range energy beam from Mars connected with Earth's defense grid, its power visibly bolstering the planet's shields. A secondary layer of protection shimmered into existence, further reinforcing humanity's last line of defense. As Scott coordinated his team's efforts to continue disrupting the quantum tunneling process, a new fleet of ships appeared on the long-range sensors. His pulse quickened as he recognized the energy signatures of the Nova Terra vessels. "Admiral Stormborn has arrived," he announced, unable to keep a note of excitement from his voice. "Let's show her what we've accomplished here." The Nova Terra fleet spread out in a wide defensive formation, creating a buffer zone between Earth and the incoming LNE forces. Their advanced ships engaged the disoriented alien vessels head-on, their superior technology more than a match for the compromised invaders. On the captured flagship, Scott and his team worked feverishly to exploit their newfound advantage. "Lyra, can we modulate our energy output to create localized quantum instabilities?" he asked, an idea forming in his mind. The alien technician's eyes lit up with understanding. "Yes, I believe we can. It would further complicate the Eliani fleet's arrival, especially for their larger warships." "Do it," Scott ordered. "Let's see if we can make their big guns materialize in pieces." As they implemented this new tactic, the results were immediately apparent. Massive Eliani warships began to appear in sections, their critical systems failing as they were torn apart by spatial distortions. The carnage was both awe-inspiring and terrifying to behold. A transmission from Earth caught Scott's attention. Dr. Martinez's face appeared on the screen, her eyes bright with excitement despite the clear exhaustion etched on her features. "Commander, we've refined the quantum disruption network," she reported. "We're syncing it with your interference patterns to create a resonance effect. It should amplify the disruption significantly." Scott nodded approvingly. "Excellent work, Doctor. Let's give the LNE a welcome they won't soon forget." As they coordinated their efforts, the number of successfully arriving LNE ships dropped dramatically. Those that did make it through were battered, confused, and easy prey for Earth's defenders. The battle raged on, with humanity holding its ground against the alien onslaught. Scott's mind raced with possibilities, knowing that every moment they bought was crucial. The quantum tunneling device on the Eliani homeworld was still active, and there was no telling how many more reinforcements might be waiting to come through. As he prepared to issue new orders, Scott cast his gaze once more to the view screen. The space around Earth had become a swirling maelstrom of energy discharges, quantum fluctuations, and battling ships. In the heart of this cosmic storm, humanity stood united, fighting for its very existence. With renewed perseverance, Scott turned back to his team. "Keep up the pressure," he commanded. "We need to find a way to shut down that quantum tunneling device for good. The fate of Earth depends on it." Scott's words hung in the air as he turned to face his team. Persistence etched on his face. "We've proven we can hold them off, but now it's time to take the fight to them." As if on cue, a transmission from the lunar base lit up the main screen. Admiral Chen's stern visage filled the display, her eyes gleaming with purpose. "Commander Holmes, your success in repelling the Eliani reinforcements has given us an unprecedented opportunity. We're initiating Operation Spearhead." Scott straightened, his mind already racing with possibilities. "Operation Spearhead, Admiral?" Chen nodded, her voice crisp and authoritative. "A counteroffensive aimed at the heart of the Eliani Empire. Your captured flagship is key to this operation. We're sending Dr. Martinez and a team of our best engineers to your location. Your primary objective is to secure that ship and assist them in reverse engineering its technology, particularly the quantum tunneling capabilities." "Understood, Admiral," Scott replied, his pulse quickening at the prospect of taking the fight to the enemy. He turned to Lyra, who was already working on securing their systems. "Prepare for the arrival of Dr. Martinez's team. We need to make sure this ship is locked down tight." As Scott's team bustled with activity, securing the flagship and preparing for the arrival of Earth's scientific elite, the battle beyond continued to rage. Through the view screen, he watched as Admiral Stormborn's Nova Terra fleet engaged the remaining Eliani forces, their advanced weapons making short work of the disorganized alien ships. Hours passed in a flurry of activity. Dr. Martinez and her team arrived, immediately diving into the complexities of the Eliani technology. Scott found himself in awe of their rapid progress, watching as they deciphered alien systems with remarkable speed. "Commander," Dr. Martinez called out, her eyes alight with excitement, "we've made a breakthrough in understanding the quantum tunneling mechanism. With more time, we might be able to replicate it." Scott nodded, hope surging through him. "Excellent work, Doctor. Keep at it. This could be our ticket to striking at the Eliani homeworld." As the research team worked tirelessly, Scott received updates from across the solar system. Admiral Steele's forces had arrived from the Kuiper Belt, bringing with them a wealth of salvaged Eliani technology. They were establishing a forward base on Ceres, turning the dwarf planet into a staging ground for humanity's counteroffensive. A transmission from Mars caught Scott's attention. Lieutenant Chen's face appeared on the screen, her expression a mix of excitement and disbelief. "Commander, you won't believe what we found here. A chamber full of dormant nanomachines, buried deep within the ancient reactor complex. They're designed for rapid terraforming, but we think they could be adapted for other purposes." Scott's mind raced with the implications. "Good work, Lieutenant. That could be a game changer. Keep me updated on your progress." As the hours ticked by, Scott used the flagship's advanced sensors to gather intelligence on the Eliani homeworld. What he discovered sent a chill down his spine. "Dr. Martinez," he called out, "I've located the source of the quantum tunneling device. It's on a heavily fortified moon orbiting the Eliani homeworld." Martinez hurried over, her eyes widening as she took in the data. "This is crucial information, Commander. We'll need to factor this into our assault plans." Suddenly, an alert blared through the ship. Scott rushed to the main console, his heart racing. "What is it?" Lyra's fingers flew over the controls, her voice tight with tension. "Long-range sensors are detecting a massive energy buildup in the Eliani home system. It looks like they're preparing for another attack." Scott's eyes hardened. He opened a channel to Admiral Chen. "Admiral, we've got a situation. The Eliani are gearing up for another assault. We need to move fast." Chen's response was immediate. "Understood, Commander. We're accelerating Operation Spearhead. You have 72 hours to prepare for our counteroffensive. We're assembling a joint task force as we speak." As Scott relayed the news to his team, the atmosphere on the flagship crackled with urgency. Dr. Martinez and her team redoubled their efforts, working around the clock to unlock the secrets of the Eliani technology. With less than 3 days until the launch of humanity's first interstellar assault, Scott found himself at the center of a whirlwind of activity. He coordinated with Admiral Stormborn, planning the vanguard assault that would draw the Eliani fleet away from their homeworld. He conferred with Admiral Steele, discussing logistics and support for the operation, and all the while, he prepared his own strike team for their crucial mission to disable the quantum tunneling device. As the deadline approached, Dr. Martinez made a final breakthrough. "Commander," she called out, her voice hoarse from exhaustion but filled with triumph. "We've done it. We've created a prototype quantum tunneling device. It's small scale, but it should allow your strike team to bypass the Eliani's outer defenses." Scott's heart raced with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. As he watched the prototype being installed in his team's ships, he knew they were about to embark on the most daring mission in human history. The moment of truth arrived. Scott stood on the bridge of the captured Eliani flagship, now repurposed as the command center for the strike team. Through the view screen, he watched as humanity's assault force assembled, a vast array of ships ranging from cutting-edge Novaterra battleships to hybrid human Eliani craft. Admiral Chen's voice came through the comm system, addressing the entire fleet. "Operation Spearhead is a go. The fate of Earth rests in your hands. Good luck and Godspeed." As the massive fleet began its journey towards the Eliani home system, Scott took a deep breath, steadying himself for the challenges ahead. The strike team's mission was clear: infiltrate the Eliani moon, disable the quantum tunneling device, and pave the way for humanity's victory. With a final glance at Earth, growing smaller in the distance, Scott turned his attention to the task at hand. The next few days would determine the future of both species, and he was determined to see humanity emerge triumphant. Scott's gaze swept across the bridge of the captured Eliani flagship, now transformed into the nerve center of humanity's most daring operation. The prototype quantum tunneling device hummed softly, its alien technology melded with human ingenuity. As the vast fleet began its journey towards the Eliani home system, Scott felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. "All systems operational," Lyra reported, her fingers dancing across the alien controls with practiced ease. "Quantum tunneling device stable and ready for activation on your command." Scott nodded, his eyes fixed on the main view screen. The stars streaked by as the combined human fleet pushed deeper into uncharted space. Admiral Stormborn's Novaterra ships took point, their sleek hulls gleaming in the light of distant suns. "Strike team, report in," Scott ordered, his voice steady despite the tension coiled in his chest. One by one, his team sounded off, each member ready for the mission that would decide the fate of humanity. As the last acknowledgement came through, Scott opened a channel to Admiral Chen. "Admiral, strike team is green across the board. We're ready to proceed with Phase 1 of Operation Spearhead." Chen's face appeared on the screen, her expression a mask of tenacity. "Understood, Commander. You have clearance to proceed. May fortune favor the bold." The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Scott watched as Admiral Stormborn's vanguard engaged the Eliani's outer defenses, their advanced weapons tearing through the alien formations. The Novaterra fleet moved with a grace that belied their size, executing complex maneuvers that left the Eliani scrambling to respond. "Now's our chance," Scott announced, his heart racing. "Activate quantum tunneling devices." In an instant, Scott's strike team vanished from the main battlefield. The disorientation of quantum travel lasted only a moment before they reappeared in orbit around the heavily fortified Eliani moon. Through the view screen, Scott could see the massive structure housing the quantum tunneling device, its energy signature pulsing like a beacon. "We've caught them off guard," Lyra exclaimed, her eyes wide as she scanned the tactical readouts. "Their defensive grid is in chaos." Scott didn't waste a moment. "All ships, commence attack pattern Omega. Take out those defense platforms and clear us a path to the surface." The strike team's ships dove into action, their weapons blazing. Eliani defense satellites exploded in silent bursts of fire and debris. On the moon's surface, anti-aircraft batteries tried to track the human vessels, but their targeting systems were no match for the speed and agility of the hybrid craft. As they fought their way through the moon's defenses, Scott received a transmission from Earth. Dr. Martinez's face appeared on the screen, her eyes bright with excitement despite the clear exhaustion etched on her features. "Commander, we've made a breakthrough," she reported. "We've found a way to temporarily disrupt the Eliani's quantum communications network. It should give you a significant advantage in coordinating your attack." Scott's mind raced with the possibilities. "Excellent work, Doctor. Transmit the data immediately. We'll put it to good use." As the strike team pushed closer to their objective, Scott coordinated with Admiral Steele's support fleet. The long-range hybrid weapons developed by Major Hawkins and Captain Reeves proved devastatingly effective, their precision strikes crippling key Eliani installations across the system. The battle for the moon's surface was fierce. Eliani troops poured out of fortified bunkers, their energy weapons lighting up the airless landscape. Scott led his team from the front, using the captured flagship's advanced systems to outmaneuver the alien defenders. "Push forward!" Scott shouted as they fought their way through a heavily defended choke point. "We need to reach that central chamber." The team advanced relentlessly, their modified weapons cutting through Eliani armor with ease. As they neared the heart of the facility, Scott received an urgent communication from Admiral Chen. "Commander, long-range sensors have detected the first signs of the massive Eliani attack force preparing to strike Earth," Chen reported, her voice tight with concern. "Our window of opportunity is closing fast. You need to disable that quantum tunneling device now." Scott gritted his teeth, redoubling his efforts. "Understood, Admiral. We're almost there." The central chamber loomed before them, a vast cathedral of alien technology. At its center stood the quantum tunneling device, a colossal structure that pulsed with otherworldly energy. As Scott's team rushed to secure the area, they encountered an unexpected obstacle. "Commander, we've got a problem," one of the tech specialists called out. "The device is protected by some kind of advanced AI defense system. It's adapting to our attempts to breach its defenses." Scott's mind raced as he assessed the situation. The AI's defenses shifted and morphed, countering each of their attacks with uncanny precision. He realized that brute force alone wouldn't be enough to overcome this final hurdle. "Dr. Martinez," Scott called out over the comlink, "we need a way to bypass this AI. Any ideas?" As Martinez and her team worked feverishly to find a solution, Scott received word that Admiral Stormborn's vanguard was taking heavy losses. The Eliani fleet, realizing the true target of the human attack, began to disengage and race back towards the moon. Time was running out. Scott could see the purpose on the faces of his team as they worked tirelessly to breach the AI's defenses. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, and failure was not an option. Suddenly, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Lieutenant Chen's voice crackled over the comm system from Mars. "Commander, we've successfully weaponized the ancient terraforming nanomachines. We're transmitting the data now. They might be able to disrupt the AI's defenses." Scott's eyes lit up with renewed hope. As the data streamed in, he quickly formulated a plan. "Load the nanomachine program into our systems," he ordered. "We're going to give this AI a taste of ancient Martian technology." As the team prepared to deploy their secret weapon, Scott knew they were in a race against time. The returning Eliani fleet drew closer with each passing moment, and the massive attack force threatening Earth loomed on the horizon. The success of Operation Spearhead. Spearhead was reaching its critical juncture. As Scott's team prepared to deploy the weaponized nanomachines, alarms blared throughout the Eliani moon base. The aliens had finally realized the true nature of the human attack. "They're on to us!" Lyra shouted, her hands flying over the control panel. "Massive Eliani forces converging on our position." Scott gritted his teeth, his mind racing. "We don't have a choice. Deploy the nanomachines now." With a hiss, the canister of microscopic machines was released into the quantum tunneling device's control systems. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the alien technology began to spark and crackle. "It's working," one of the tech specialists exclaimed. "The AI defenses are breaking down." But their victory was short-lived. The quantum tunneling device began to emit an ominous hum, its energy signature fluctuating wildly. Commander, the specialist's voice was tight with fear. The device is destabilizing. We may have triggered a chain reaction. Scott's comm crackled to life, Admiral Stormborn's voice cutting through the chaos. Holmes, we've engaged the Eliani fleet. They're in disarray, but we've taken heavy losses. What's your status? The device is compromised, Scott replied, his eyes fixed on the pulsing alien technology. But it's unstable. We need to evacuate immediately. As if to punctuate his words, a violent tremor shook the moon base. Cracks began to form in the chamber's walls, and the air filled with the scream of twisting metal. All personnel, fall back to the ships, Scott ordered. We're leaving. His team scrambled to obey, gathering what data they could as they retreated. Scott was about to follow when a flashing alert on a nearby console caught his eye. His blood ran cold as he processed the information. Admiral Chen, he called urgently, we have a new problem. There's a massive Eliani warship approaching the moon. It's like nothing we've ever seen before. Chen's reply was grim. Confirmed, Commander. Our long-range sensors just picked it up. It appears to be some kind of superweapon. You need to get out of there now. Scott hesitated, his gaze drawn back to the destabilizing quantum tunneling device. An idea began to form in his mind, dangerous and desperate. Sir, he said slowly, I think I might have a way to take out that warship, but I'll need to stay behind. Absolutely not, Chen barked. That's a suicide mission, Commander. I order you to evacuate immediately. But Scott had already made his decision. Get my team out of here, he said, cutting the communication. He turned to Lyra, who stood resolutely by his side. You too, Lieutenant. That's an order. Lyra's eyes blazed with defiance, but she nodded reluctantly. Don't you dare die on us, Commander, she said before sprinting towards the exit. Alone in the chamber, Scott worked feverishly to reconfigure the quantum tunneling device. The moon shuddered around him, debris raining from the ceiling. Through the base's sensors, he could see the massive Eliani warship growing larger by the second. Suddenly, a new alert flashed across his screen. A group of Eliani ships had broken formation, engaging the approaching superweapon. Scott recognized their markings, the Eliani resistance. Brave souls, he muttered, redoubling his efforts. The resistance ships bought him precious time, but they were being annihilated by the warship's overwhelming firepower. As Scott worked, he became aware of a new presence in the system. Admiral Stormborn's fleet was approaching, cutting through the chaos of the battle. Commander Holmes, Stormborn's voice came through, filled with static. We're here to extract you. The quantum communications network is down, but we'll get you out. Negative, Admiral, Scott replied, his fingers flying over the alien controls. I'm reconfiguring the device to create one last tunnel. If this works, it'll swallow that Eliani superweapon whole. There was a moment of stunned silence before Stormborn spoke again. Understood, Commander. We'll keep the Eliani off your back. Good luck. The next few minutes were a blur of frantic activity. Scott pushed the failing systems to their limits, the quantum tunneling device screaming in protest. The Eliani warship loomed ever closer, its weapons powering up to destroy the moon. Just as Scott input the final command, a massive tremor shook the base. He was thrown to the ground, his head striking the console. Through blurred vision, he saw the quantum tunneling device burst into blinding light. A colossal rift tore open in space, directly in the path of the Eliani warship. The superweapon, unable to alter its course in time, plunged into the swirling vortex. In an instant, the massive ship vanished, swallowed by the quantum tunnel. As the rift collapsed, the backlash of energy ripped through the moon base. Scott felt the floor giving way beneath him, the world dissolving into chaos. His last thought before darkness took him was of Earth, and the hope that his sacrifice had given humanity a fighting chance. In the aftermath of the explosion, Admiral Stormborn's fleet engaged in a fierce battle with the remaining Eliani forces. The fate of Commander Scott Holmes remained unknown, lost in the destruction of the Eliani moon. As the conflict raged on, the information discovered by Dr. Martinez on Earth threatened to change the entire nature of the war, offering a glimmer of hope for a resolution that could save both species. The quantum tunneling device erupted in a blinding flash of energy, consuming the Eliani superweapon in its voracious maw. As the colossal ship vanished into the swirling vortex, Scott's mind raced with the implications of what he'd just witnessed. The backlash of energy tore through the moon base, threatening to rip it apart at the seams. Scott's legs moved before his brain fully processed the danger. He sprinted towards the exit, his lungs burning as he navigated the crumbling corridors. Chunks of alien metal rained down around him, narrowly missing his head as he ducked and weaved through the chaos. "This is Commander Holmes," he shouted into his comm unit, hoping it still functioned. "Quantum device unstable. Moonbase compromised, requesting immediate evac." Static crackled in response, but he thought he heard a faint voice cutting through the interference. He had no time to decipher it as the floor beneath his feet buckled and heaved. Scott burst out of the facility's main entrance, the airless Eliani moon stretching before him. Through his helmet's visor, he saw the devastation unfolding. Massive fissures split the lunar surface, and in the distance, entire sections of the moon were beginning to drift apart. A proximity alert blared in his suit, warning of incoming Eliani forces. Scott's heart sank as he realized he might have survived the exploding base, only to be cut down by enemy fire. Suddenly, a sleek human craft appeared on the horizon, streaking towards his position with breathtaking speed. It dodged incoming Eliani fire with a grace that seemed to defy the laws of physics. "Commander Holmes, this is Captain Ethan Stark," a voice crackled through Scott's comm. "Admiral Stormborn sent us to get you out of this mess. Hang tight, sir." Relief washed over Scott as he watched Stark's ship touch down nearby, kicking up a cloud of lunar dust. The ship's hatch opened, revealing the silhouettes of his strike team members who had managed to evacuate earlier. "Let's go, Commander," Lyra shouted, waving him forward. Scott didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted towards the waiting ship, his magnetized boots barely keeping contact with the fragmenting lunar surface. As he reached the hatch, a massive tremor nearly knocked him off his feet. Lyra grabbed his arm, yanking him inside as Stark sealed the hatch behind them. "Strap in, everyone," Stark called out from the cockpit. "This is going to be one hell of a ride." The ship lifted off, accelerating with gut-wrenching force. Scott watched through a view screen as the Eliani moon receded behind them, its surface now a patchwork of floating fragments, held together by rapidly failing artificial gravity. Stark's piloting skills were put to the test as he wove through the debris field, dodging not only moon fragments, but also the numerous Eliani ships converging on their position. Energy beams lanced past their hull, missing by mere meters. "Admiral Stormborn," Stark called out, his voice tight with concentration. "We have the package requesting support for extraction." Scott's eyes widened as he saw the Nova Terra fleet appear on their sensors, forming a protective barrier around their small craft. The space around them erupted in a fierce firefight as human and Eliani ships clashed. As they fought their way back towards the main fleet, Scott noticed something unexpected on the tactical display. A group of Eliani ships were attacking their own kind, creating chaos in the enemy formation. "The Resistance," Scott breathed, remembering the brave Eliani who had bought him time to reconfigure the quantum device. "They're still fighting." Their moment of hope was short-lived as new alarms blared throughout the ship. The quantum tunnel that had swallowed the Eliani superweapon was destabilizing, sending out waves of spatial distortion across the battlefield. Scott watched in awe and terror as ships from both sides were caught in these anomalies, blinking out of existence only to reappear in entirely different sectors of space. The battlefield had become a three-dimensional chess game where the board itself was changing unpredictably. "All ships, adjust course," Admiral Stormborn's voice rang out over the fleet-wide channel. "Use the anomalies to cover our retreat, but don't get too close. We're withdrawing from the system." As Stark's ship rejoined the main fleet, Scott felt a mix of emotions wash over him. They had struck a significant blow against the Eliani, but at what cost? The moon's destruction, the spatial anomalies, the Eliani resistance. All of it added up to a situation far more complex than they had anticipated. His thoughts were interrupted by an incoming transmission from Admiral Chen. "Commander Holmes, glad to see you made it out," Chen said, her face appearing on a nearby screen. "We've just received critical information from Dr. Martinez on Earth. It seems the Eliani situation might be more complicated than we thought. Before Scott could respond, another alert sounded. Admiral Steele's face appeared on a separate screen, his expression grim. "We've detected a second wave of Eliani reinforcements mobilizing in the Kuiper Belt," he reported. "I'm implementing countermeasures, but we need to prepare for an extended engagement." Scott's mind raced as he processed the flood of information. The destruction of the quantum tunneling device and the Eliani superweapon had been a major victory, but it was clear that the war was not nearly finished. As the human fleet regrouped at the edge of the Eliani system, he knew that the decisions made in the coming hours would shape the future of both species. With a deep breath, Scott turned to address the assembled command staff on the various screens before him. "All right," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos they'd just endured. "Let's assess our situation and plan our next move. We've won this battle, but the war is taking an unexpected turn. We need to reassess our strategy and figure out our next move." The assembled command staff nodded in agreement, their faces grim but determined on the various screens before him. Admiral Chen cleared her throat, drawing everyone's attention. "Commander Holmes, your actions have bought us a critical advantage," she said. "But we've received new intelligence from Dr. Martinez on Earth that changes our understanding of the Eliani situation. I'm convening an emergency meeting to discuss our next steps." Scott nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. As the ship docked with the flagship, he made his way to the command center, joining the other top officers gathered around a large holographic display. Admiral Chen wasted no time. "Dr. Martinez's team has made a breakthrough in deciphering the Eliani language and cultural database from the captured flagship. It appears the Eliani are facing a crisis of their own, one that's driving their aggressive expansion." The hologram shifted, displaying complex data streams and alien text. "Their home system is dying," Chen continued. "They're desperately seeking new habitable worlds to ensure their species' survival." A murmur ran through the assembled officers. Scott leaned forward, studying the data intently. "This changes everything," he said. "If we can communicate with them, maybe we can find a peaceful solution." Admiral Stormborn's voice cut through the discussion. "We can't let our guard down. The Eliani have shown no hesitation in attacking us so far." "Agreed," Chen said. "But this information gives us an opportunity. I propose we attempt a diplomatic approach while maintaining our military readiness." After a heated debate, a plan began to take shape. Scott found himself at the center of it, chosen to lead a small delegation to initiate contact with the Eliani leadership. Hours later, Scott stood before the captured Eliani flagship's communication array, a carefully crafted message loaded and ready to transmit. He took a deep breath, acutely aware of the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "Initiating transmission," he announced. The message beamed out into space, carrying humanity's proposal for a ceasefire and negotiations. It included evidence of their understanding of the Eliani's plight and offered potential solutions for mutual benefit. As they waited for a response, the human fleet prepared for all contingencies. Scott watched from the command center as Admiral Stormborn's ships formed a defensive perimeter, their weapons primed and ready. On another screen, he saw Admiral Steele's support fleet adjusting the placement of cloaked minefields, creating a funnel to control any potential Eliani approach. Reports streamed in from across the solar system. On Mars, Lieutenant Sarah Chen and Captain Michael Rodriguez had accelerated the production of weaponized nanomachines, creating a stockpile large enough to neutralize the entire Eliani homeworld if negotiations failed. Dr. Martinez's team on Earth made another breakthrough, partially restoring the quantum communication network. Scott felt a surge of hope as the improved long-range communication significantly enhanced the fleet's coordination. The waiting game was interrupted by alarming reports of spatial anomalies caused by the destabilized quantum tunnel. Scott watched in awe as ships from both sides blinked in and out of existence, reappearing in unexpected locations. "We need to study these phenomena," Admiral Chen ordered. "They could be a game-changer if we can predict or control them." As tension mounted, a new development caught everyone's attention. The Eliani resistance ships that had aided their escape were now engaged in a fierce battle with loyal Eliani forces. The internal conflict provided an unexpected advantage, allowing the human fleet to strengthen their position without immediate threat. After what felt like an eternity, a response from the Eliani leadership arrived. Scott held his breath as the message was decrypted and translated. "They've agreed to a temporary ceasefire," Admiral Chen announced, her voice filled with cautious optimism. "They're proposing a face-to-face meeting on a neutral space station orbiting a gas giant in the system." The command center erupted in a flurry of activity as preparations for the peace talks began. Scott found himself at the center of it all, chosen to lead the human delegation. He worked closely with Dr. Martinez, who would provide scientific expertise, and a select group of military advisors. As they prepared, Scott and his team underwent intensive briefings on Eleni culture and psychology. They pored over the wealth of information gathered from the captured flagship and previous encounters, determined to enter the negotiations as prepared as possible. Just as hope for a peaceful resolution began to grow, Admiral Steele's support fleet detected unusual energy readings from the direction of the Eliani homeworld. Long-range scans revealed a massive array of orbital platforms being activated, their purpose unknown. "This could be a trap," Admiral Stormborn warned during a strategy session. "We need to be prepared for anything." Admiral Chen nodded grimly. "Agreed. All forces will maintain combat readiness. Admiral Stormborn, conduct a series of coordinated maneuvers to position your ships for quick response to any potential betrayal or surprise attack." As the final preparations were made, Scott boarded the heavily armed and shielded vessel that would take them to the peace talks. He stood at the viewport, watching as the human fleet grew smaller behind them. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, knowing that the fate of both species could hinge on the outcome of these negotiations. As they approached the neutral space station, Scott's mind raced with possibilities. Would the Eliani be open to a peaceful resolution? What were those orbital platforms for? Could they find a way to coexist, or was this merely a prelude to an even greater conflict? The docking procedure began, and Scott steeled himself for what lay ahead. As the airlock cycled, he exchanged glances with his team, seeing his own mix of purpose and apprehension reflected in their eyes. Whatever happened next would shape the future of interstellar relations for generations to come. The airlock door slid open, revealing the alien architecture of the space station. Scott took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to face the unknown and fight for a future where both humanity and the Eliani could thrive. As the airlock doors parted, Scott and his team found themselves face-to-face with the Eliani delegation. The alien beings towered over the humans, their iridescent skin shimmering under the station's artificial lighting. Scott suppressed a shudder, reminding himself that these were not the mindless aggressors they had once believed, but a species driven to desperate measures by their own impending extinction. "Welcome, representatives of Earth," the lead Eleni spoke, its voice a melodious hum that seemed to resonate within Scott's chest. "We are prepared to hear your proposal." As they moved into the negotiation chamber, Scott couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. He glanced at the ornate walls, wondering if Admiral Chen's cloaked reconnaissance drones had managed to infiltrate the station as planned. The chamber itself was a marvel of alien architecture, with sweeping arches that seemed to defy gravity and pulsating light panels that cast an eerie glow over the proceedings. Scott took his place at the circular table, acutely aware of the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "Esteemed Eliani leaders," Scott began, his voice steady despite the tension in the room, "we come here today with a proposal for peace and mutual cooperation." As Scott outlined the human plan for collaborative terraforming efforts and resource sharing, he watched the Eliani closely for any reaction. Their faces remained impassive, but he noticed a slight ripple in their skin, a sign of interest perhaps. Dr. Martinez stepped forward, her tablet projecting a holographic display of complex data. "Our research indicates that with our combined technologies, we could revitalize your home system within a decade," she explained, her fingers dancing across the display to highlight key points. The lead Eliani leaned forward, its multifaceted eyes reflecting the hologram. "Your proposal is intriguing," it admitted, "but it fails to address our most pressing concern." Scott felt a chill run down his spine as the Eliani's tone shifted. The alien's skin darkened, a clear sign of agitation. "Our species faces not just resource depletion, but genetic degradation," the Eliani leader continued, its voice taking on a harsh edge. "We demand access to human DNA and terraform technology as reparations for the destruction your kind has caused." The human delegation exchanged uneasy glances. This was not the response they had anticipated. Scott's mind raced, trying to formulate a response that wouldn't escalate the already tense situation. Before he could speak, his comm unit vibrated against his wrist. A quick glance revealed an encrypted message from Admiral Chen. "Protocol Omega initiated. Weapon system detected. Proceed with caution." Scott's heart pounded as he processed the implications. The talks were on the brink of collapse, and an unknown Aleni weapon system posed a new threat. He knew he had to act fast to salvage the situation. "We understand your concerns," Scott said, his voice calm despite the turmoil in his mind, "and we're prepared to offer a compromise." The Eliani leaders tilted their heads in unison, a gesture Scott had come to recognize as curiosity. He took a deep breath, knowing his next words could determine the fate of both species. "We propose a limited exchange of genetic data and terraforming technology," Scott continued, choosing his words carefully. "In return, we ask for immediate Eliani disarmament and full disclosure of all weapon systems, including the orbital platforms we've detected around your homeworld." A ripple of surprise passed through the Eliani delegation. Their skin flickered through a range of colors, a clear sign of internal debate. The lead Eliani raised a hand, its long fingers splaying in a gesture Scott couldn't interpret. "We require time to consider your unexpected offer," the alien leader announced. "We call for a brief recess." As the Eleni filed out of the chamber, Scott turned to his team. "Dr. Martinez, now's our chance. Run those scans." The scientist nodded, pulling out a device disguised as a standard datapad. She began to discreetly scan the room, focusing on the areas where the Eliani had been sitting. Outside the station, the situation was growing increasingly tense. Admiral Stormborn's fleet had detected alarming energy fluctuations from the Eliani orbital platforms. Ships on both sides powered up their shields and charged weapons, each side preparing for the possibility of imminent conflict. Back in the negotiation chamber, Scott paced nervously, waiting for the Eliani to return. The fate of both species hung in the balance, and he knew the next few moments would be crucial. As the minutes ticked by, Scott couldn't help but wonder about the larger picture. What was happening back on Earth? How were the Martian nanomachine factories faring? And what of the Kuiper Belt defenses? His thoughts were interrupted as the chamber doors slid open, revealing the returning Eliani delegation. Their skin now pulsed with a deep royal blue, a color Scott had never seen them display before. The lead Eliani stepped forward, its multifaceted eyes fixed on Scott. "Commander Holmes," it began, its voice resonating with an emotion Scott couldn't quite place. "We have considered your proposal, and we have reached a decision." Scott held his breath, acutely aware that the next words uttered in this room could spark either a new era of interstellar cooperation or reignite a war that could spell doom for both their species. The Eleni leader's skin shifted again, this time to a shimmering gold. "We are prepared to accept your offer, with certain conditions." "Modifications," the Eleni leader continued, its skin now pulsing with a deep golden hue. "We require immediate access to a small group of human volunteers for genetic experimentation." The words hung in the air, heavy with implications. Scott felt his heart rate quicken as he processed the unexpected demand. He glanced at Dr. Martinez, whose eyes had widened in shock. "This is unexpected," Scott managed, buying time as he scrambled to formulate a response. "Can you elaborate on the nature of these experiments?" As the Eliani leader began to explain, Scott's comm unit vibrated once more. He discreetly checked the message from Admiral Chen. "Orbital platforms aligned. Massive energy readings. Initiating Operation Sunburst." Scott's mind raced, trying to process the new information while maintaining his composure in front of the Eliani delegation. He knew he had to act fast, balancing the diplomatic tightrope while Admiral Chen's fleet moved into position. "Your request for human volunteers is concerning," Scott said carefully. "However, we might be able to reach a compromise." The lead Eliani tilted its head, a gesture Scott had come to recognize as curiosity. "We are listening, Commander Holmes." Scott took a deep breath, acutely aware of the weight of his next words. We propose providing a limited number of human tissue samples for your study, under strict supervision. In exchange, we ask for the immediate deactivation of the orbital weapon array we've detected around your homeworld. The chamber fell silent as the Eliani processed his words. Scott could see the subtle shifts in their skin color, indicating internal debate. Suddenly, the ship's communication system crackled to life. Commander Holmes, this is Admiral Chen. We have a situation developing. Scott's heart sank. He had hoped to keep the negotiations separate from the military maneuvers, but it seemed events were spiraling beyond his control. Go ahead, Admiral, he said, keeping his voice steady. A fleet of Eliani ships has taken position between us and the homeworld, Chen reported. But they're not hostile. They appear to be creating a buffer zone. The lead Eliani's skin flickered with surprise. The resistance, it hissed, turning to its companions. Scott seized the moment. It seems there are factions among your people who desire peace as much as we do, he said. Perhaps this is an opportunity for both our species to step back from the brink. As if on cue, Dr. Martinez approached, her tablet displaying the results of her covert scans. Commander, she said urgently, I've completed my analysis. The Eliani genetic degradation is far more severe than we initially thought. Without intervention, their species could face extinction within a few generations. The Eliani leader's skin paled to an ashen gray. How did you obtain this information? Scott ignored the question, focusing instead on the opportunity this new information presented. We have a chance here, he said, his voice filled with conviction. A chance to save both our species, to forge a new path forward together. He straightened, looking each Eliani in the eye. I propose a joint human-Eliani scientific task force to address your genetic degradation. We'll couple this with a phased disarmament plan for both our species. In return, we ask for full access to your technology, including your advanced AI systems and the designs for the orbital energy array. The chamber erupted in a flurry of alien vocalizations as the Eliani debated among themselves. Scott waited, his heart pounding, knowing that the next few moments could determine the fate of both their species. Suddenly, his comm unit buzzed again. Admiral Chen's voice came through, tight with tension. Commander, we're detecting a massive energy surge in the Kuiper Belt. Long-range sensors indicate some kind of Eliani superweapon is activating. Scott's blood ran cold. He looked up at the Eliani delegation. Their debate halted as they too received the news through their own communication channels. It seems, Scott said, his voice low and controlled, that we are both facing threats we didn't anticipate. The question is, do we face them together or allow them to drive us further apart? The lead Eliani's skin shifted through a kaleidoscope of colors before settling on a deep, pulsating blue. We need time to consult with our highest-ranking scientists and military advisors, it said, its voice trembling slightly. Scott nodded, knowing that pushing too hard now could shatter the fragile progress they'd made. Take the time you need, he said. But remember, every moment we delay could bring us closer to a conflict that neither of us wants. As the Eliani filed out of the chamber once more, Scott turned to his team. The weight of countless lives rested on their shoulders, the fate of two species hanging in the balance. Dr. Martinez, he said, his voice tight with tension, I need you to compile all the data we have on the Eliani genetic degradation. If we're going to convince them to work with us, we need to show them we're their best hope for survival. He turned to his military advisor. Contact Admiral Chen. I want a full report on the positioning of our fleet and the Eliani resistance ships, and I need everything we have on that superweapon in the Kuiper Belt. As his team sprang into action, Scott moved to the viewport, gazing out at the stars. Somewhere out there, fleets of ships were maneuvering into position, weapons primed and ready. On distant planets, scientists and soldiers prepared for either peace or war. The next few hours would determine whether humanity and the Eliani would step into a new era of cooperation or plunge into a conflict that could spell doom for them both. And Scott Holmes found himself at the center of it all, a single human tasked with finding a path through the chaos. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenges ahead. The Alani would return soon, and he had to be ready. The fate of 2 worlds depended on it. Scott's gaze remained fixed on the stars, his mind racing with possibilities. The weight of 2 civilizations pressed upon him, but he refused to buckle under the pressure. As he turned back to face the room, the chamber doors slid open once more, revealing the returning Eliani delegation. The lead Eleni's skin pulsed with a mix of deep blue and gold, reflecting their internal conflict. "Commander Holmes," it began, its voice wavering slightly, "we have—" A sudden tremor shook the station, cutting off the Eleni's words. Alarms blared as the lights flickered. "Report!" Scott barked into his comm unit. Admiral Chen's voice crackled through, tight with tension. "The superweapon in the Kuiper Belt has begun powering up. Energy readings are off the charts. We're out of time, Commander." Scott's mind raced, processing the implications. He locked eyes with the Eliani leader, seeing a mix of fear and resignation in its multifaceted gaze. "You've lost control of it, haven't you?" Scott asked, his voice low and urgent. The Eliani's skin paled to a sickly gray. "It was never meant to be activated. A failsafe, nothing more." But now, Scott made a split-second decision. "Admiral Chen, deploy the nanomachines from Mars. Target the superweapon's location." "Understood, Commander. Deploying now." The Eliani delegation erupted in a cacophony of alien vocalizations, their skin flashing through a spectrum of colors. Scott raised his hands, calling for silence. "Listen to me," he urged. "We don't have time for debate. That weapon could destroy us all. We need to act now, together." As if in response to his words, a new voice cut through the chaos. "This is Commander Lyra of the Eliani Resistance. We have crucial intelligence about the superweapon's vulnerabilities." Scott's comm unit lit up with incoming data. He quickly relayed the information to Admiral Chen and Admiral Stormborn's Nova Terra fleet. "Precision strike incoming," Stormborn reported, "combining our advanced weaponry with the nanomachine assault." The next few minutes stretched into an eternity as Scott and the Eliani delegation watched the unfolding battle on the station's holographic display. The swarm of nanomachines, appearing as a silver cloud, enveloped the massive Eliani superweapon. Simultaneously, pinpoint energy beams from the human fleet struck key locations identified by Commander Lyra. The superweapon's energy readings fluctuated wildly, then began to decline. A cheer went up from the human side of the room as the Eliani weapon powered down, rendered inert by the combined assault. The lead Eliani turned to Scott, its skin now a deep, solemn blue. "It seems we have no choice but to accept your proposal, Commander Holmes. We call for an immediate ceasefire." Scott nodded, relief washing over him. "Agreed. Let's begin the process of standing down our forces." As the tension in the room began to dissipate, a sudden alarm blared from the station's sensors. The holographic display flickered, showing a massive disturbance near the location of the disabled superweapon. "Energy spike detected," one of the human technicians shouted. It's a quantum tunnel destabilization." Scott watched in awe as a swirling vortex of energy materialized in space. From its depths emerged a massive ship, its hull scarred and pitted with age. "By the stars," the lead Eliani gasped. "It's the planet killer. But how?" Before anyone could react, a transmission cut through all communication channels. The holographic display shifted, revealing the bridge of the Eliani planet killer. Its crew appeared ancient, their skin mottled with age. "This is Captain Zorn of the Eliani planet killer Nova Storm," a wizened Eliani announced, its voice filled with a strange mix of exhaustion and excitement. "We come in peace, bearing knowledge that could change everything." Scott stepped forward, his heart pounding from this unexpected turn of events. "This is Commander Scott Holmes of Earth. We're listening, Captain Zorn." As the ancient Eliani began to explain their centuries trapped in the time dilation field of the quantum tunnel, Scott felt the universe shift around him. The knowledge they offered, the potential for peace it represented, it was almost too much to comprehend. He glanced at the Eliani delegation, seeing the same mix of hope and disbelief in their alien features. In that moment, Scott knew that the real work was just beginning. The path ahead would be challenging, but for the first time since the war began, he felt a genuine spark of hope for the future. With a deep breath, Scott prepared to take the first steps into this new era of human-Eliani relations. The fate of both species hung in the balance, but now, at least, they faced that future together.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.